Sorry, those are all minutes. November 7th, 2018. Let's see if I have an agenda. Yeah, this must be there. Okay, the first item on the agenda is a request for determination of applicability for 8 Ruth Lane, a proposal to install bluestone under deck, hot tub, and privacy fence.
Good evening. My name's Matt, owner of Mike Stacy Landscaping, and I got a proposal here for a permeable patio. It's within the footprint of the existing deck layout, so it's been a disturbed area before, and the permeable is going to be such that there'd be gravel between, about a half-inch gap between the pavers as laid on a gravel base as well. So if there's any questions I can answer.
Thank you. Any comments for us, Sammy?
It is within the 50-foot, or sorry, it's not within the 50-foot buffer. It's just outside, well, the corner nicks it, the work limit. But what they would like to do is, they have a existing second-story deck, and there's like a walkout on the house. So they would like to enclose part of the under part, and then have a hot tub on a pervious patio there within the 100-foot buffer to a BVW. It doesn't get any closer to the wetland than the existing deck above it. And I thought it was suitable as an RDA. I would just recommend, and they are proposing, even though I don't think that they are required to propose a mitigation for it, they are going to put a couple of plethora shrub plantings. And I would just condition that that space cannot, in the future, ever become livable, habitable space. I mean, obviously they could apply to conservation for approval of that, but it just can't just become that. And that if the hot tub water is ever to be drained, that it just not be drained within the buffer zone to the wetland. Other than that, I would recommend approval with a -3 determination.
Thank you, Amy. Any comments? Start with you, Ernie.
The concrete patio is 55 feet from the wetland now. I can see it on the plot plan. Can you indicate that?
I don't have my measurement tool for me. Are you talking about the edge of the deck too?
No, you say there's an existing concrete patio under the deck. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And is that, how close is that to the wetland then?
It's still underneath the deck.
It's
It
probably 55, 60 feet away.
Oh, yeah. Great. Okay.
The lines on this plan are a little deceiving because you have the flood zone boundary in here too.
Yeah.
It's actually this portion here is concrete.
Where the hot tub is kind of where the
Yeah,
concrete is.
it is.
Any comments, Mark?
Yeah, just one. I mean, natural cleft bluestone, even with a joint, I wouldn't consider particularly permeable. But I mean, if you had a void between the cobblestone edge and the edge of the bluestone, 6 inches wide, a foot wide, with 3/4 stone, something to grab the water before it's spilled elsewhere. And if it's a foot deep, that would certainly give you adequate to catch any runoff, because you're going to have a degree of water coming down through that deck. And rather than it spilling out,
I agree.
that would be a way to contain it, and it wouldn't be of any particular impact cost-wise to the job.
Right.
So, that's it.
Okay. Jim, any comments?
Yeah, I do kind of agree with Mark that it's not really permeable. And so what's there now is mostly grass and moss under there. Was there a little concrete?
There was a concrete pad.
A small concrete.
There's a 8x10 pad there existing, and then a lot of the drainage coming off the deck above has deteriorated any sort of or lack of sunlight, any vegetation really underneath there, so.
Yeah, it looked like for the first 4 or 5 feet from
There might be a little
it's
bit.
grass,
It's marginal.
grass
yeah.
and moss. It's pretty minimal. obviously it's a minimal impact project, but, you know, I do think since we are taking out a few hundred square feet of grass and moss, I guess it's a little southwest exposure, so that does get some vegetation there. I think it is a good idea to have those plantings and maybe even put in a couple more plants on that, what you have shown on the plan here of the different species.
Sure. Had to do something else in there.
Yeah, just to kind of make up for that increase in what's really not permeable.
Sure.
Doubling it, you think
I
be
think
sufficient?
that would be great, and maybe use 2 different species.
Harwich blueberry or something,
Yeah,
Yeah,
mix that in.
that's all I got.
yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
No comment.
No comments? Okay. Do any commissioners want to propose a motion?
I would move that we accept the plan and, you know, with the appropriate amendments that we just discussed.
Second.
We have a second, and that would be for a negative determination of -3. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Have you folks seen this? And Matt, I've got some conditions, and this will hopefully be ready at the beginning of next week.
Sounds good.
Call you when it's ready.
All right.
Please sign, it'd be great.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks.
Okay, next we have a request for determination of applicability for the Harwich Water Department, Lowell County Road, seeking to replace 12-inch diameter water pipeline. And they have requested a continuance to November 19th. So I move that we do have that continuance.
Second.
Second that, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next, we have a continuance of a notice of intent for the Barton property on 11 River Pine Circle, proposed to replace existing fiber rolls with rock revetment. I think Mark is outside.
Yeah, it's Roy Okarowski's project.
Oh.
He had said he was gonna have a substitute here maybe tonight.
Mark,
Oh, he is here.
Yes.
I can go get him. Probably. You can need a chair. Or if we're done, we have it, we'll just take it back. That works. Just so the commission knows, we did get a file number for this from DP.
Well, for the record, I'm not Roy Okarowski. I'm Mark Burgess, helping out Roy. He's out of town, so I'm helping him out. I've been briefed on the project. I've been to the site, so I have an idea of what concerns there were prior to this. And my understanding is that there was just some minor remaining questions regarding the fiber rolls. And I would agree with the assessment that this is not a place for fiber rolls. A lot of people start out this way, but they don't succeed because they're exposed to water all the time. Fiber rolls are meant to be covered. It's the only way that they're successful if they're installed in a location where they're the second line of defense, not the first. So they're just not where they need, they're not where they need to be. The revetment, from what I understand, the exposed portion of the stone is in the exact same footprint as the fiber rolls are going, or the fiber rolls are in. The stones are a rougher surface texture than the fiber rolls, so they're going to absorb more wave energy than now. And my other opinion is on these sites, the south-facing sites get hammered on an incoming tide, but also at a high tide and a storm, because they're getting the prevailing southwesterly winds that go with it a lot of the time. Now, in a nor'easter, of course, that's not true, but it's an instance where these shorelines can get a fair amount of activity, especially when the water's coming around the corner there. So nourishment isn't gonna work, that's just gonna fill in the river. And the fiber rolls won't work because you can't keep them covered. So the revetment really is the best way. It's better than a vertical wall, as you know. So we're left with that alternative apparently. And I think other than that, I'll try to address any other questions you might have had. I know Roy did supply some calculations. So with that, I'll open it up.
And I'll just,
Yeah.
sure. So for the record, I'm Emma Votor with Blue Flax Design. And I'll just review our planting plan since this was about 2 weeks ago. Our vegetation management plan is just bolstering the previous mitigation plan planting area and addressing the elements that weren't working. So we're transplanting some of the taller grasses out of that mitigation area. We're planting more native shrubs. We're removing all of the mulch that was laid down. We're gonna blanket that slope and then seed the entire area with a custom mix of native grasses and wildflowers. And then we've also revised the plan by adding 3 more eastern red cedars. And those are all the changes, so I can answer any questions that you still have about the landscape plan.
Thank you. Amy, any update for us?
Yeah, I'll be quick, just jumping off of that, so, I think the plan is a good, gonna provide a nice vegetated, buffer that will enhance habitat in the area and also provide better stability. The moving of the grasses is important because right now they're so big, they shade everything else out. So they're proposing to use species that are both were planted before and growing well, and also are naturally growing on their own, such as the fragrant sumac, which is a benefit. The eastern red cedars, there's a total of 6 being planted, which will replace some of the larger, tree mass that the commission, I think, wanted, because the oaks through two tries didn't really take. The removal of the mulch is a good thing. They're also slightly changing the grading at the top, I believe, is it to prevent the top-down erosion?
I don't believe we proposed any grading changes on this one.
Okay,
There are
I apologize.
no grading changes.
Okay.
Mhm.
But the removal of the mulch and planting of the wildflower and grass mix, which grasses have the deepest roots, will be a benefit to the top-down erosion that is occurring on the site. So I have I think the plan's good. Just quickly go over the Division of Marine Fisheries letter, which is in your packet. It is mapped habitat for bass, scallop, quahog, and oyster. It also has been identified as diagenous fish passage for alewife, herring, tomcod, white perch, and American eel, as well as eelgrass, not right at the site, but close to. So they offered, and these can be conditions if the commission saw fit. They want to minimize the seaward encroachment of the revetment. The visible part of the revetment will be where you see the rolls now. The toe stones will be out a little bit farther, but then will be covered back up. Appropriate erosion control measures would be employed to minimize runoff. So there would be, you talk about any type of siltation booms that are gonna have to be in the water when you're actually doing some little in-water work to put the toe stones in. All work should be conducted from the upland side of the project, so machine from the top reaching down as much as possible. No construction debris should be stored in the intertidal area. Fuel spills, if equipment needs to be refueled, then adequate containment and cleanup should be required. And that's the extent of their recommendations. Let's see. Roy Okarowski provided you with some of the, to the best ability, because there's really not a calculation that can be, a pure calculation that can be done for revetments versus fiber rolls. But provided you with calculations regarding the rationale behind using a rock revetment as opposed to the fiber rolls. In my review, I think they've attempted soft solutions, which is as required before requesting a hard solution. I mean, they're not going as high as many people probably would. It's a fairly low still profile. I think replacing with fiber rolls, you'd be back in another few years and you'd ruin all the nice plantings that are gonna go in that are gonna hold the bank better. So I think the combination of a better planting plan and a rough-faced wall in this location, which also I put in here, even the rocks, because some of them are gonna be a little bit below the water. You might even get a base for mussels or oysters to grow if you have it in the river there, because it's a hard structure. I think it's the best feasible option for this site at this time. That's it.
Thanks, Amy. Any questions around the table? Ernie, do you want to start?
No, I have none. I thought this chart was very interesting and informative as far as the effect of the different shorelines that we're dealing with on a regular basis, not only this, but other ones too. So I thought that was helpful. I think it's reasonable, needed.
I have no issue with it.
Any comments?
On the planting plan, was the lawn management gonna be addressed?
Yes, so we also, thank you, I actually also added a note in there that the lawn will be managed organically. No.
And the regulations are, so there's no fertilizers, even if there were organic fertilizers.
Okay. Is that gonna go into the conditions, or?
Yes, it most likely will. So just so people in the audience know, any new projects that come before the commission on an area lawn area that's been managed traditionally with fertilizers and whatnot, we've been trying to, improve our water quality. So we have the commission, as regulations enacted on October 1st, unless we specifically grant it, there's no fertilization.
And not even organics, huh?
It's on it would have to be something the commission would consider on a case-by-case basis.
I used that on my lawn the first time, and I remember what it smelled like, but
Yeah.
other than that, it worked really well.
There's not necessarily a difference in nitrogen and phosphorus,
Yeah,
whether it's organic or not,
Yeah.
so it's not necessarily helpful.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, that's all
No questions?
No questions, John?
Yeah, so just for clarity, does the cedars on the west in this plan, those, I didn't recall whether those are new planting? There's something else there now?
Yep, so we had noted in the plans previously that these were gonna be planted, but they weren't showing on the plan. They're replacing 3 oaks that didn't survive.
Oh, the ones on the west are replacing oaks.
Yes, and then we added these 3 are new to the plan on the east side, so, as of this revised plan.
And I just, following up on what Ernie said, I looked at this and I couldn't make heads or tails of it, actually. Sometime it'd be nice to hear an explanation of a little bit of this, but Roy isn't here, so.
Well, if we have a light
The way
agenda
I
sometime.
interpreted this was that it was sort of descending order of impact
Yes.
for tidal flows. In that section of the river, for example. So if you start at the top, that's sort of an environmental base along the shore. It's gonna have more erosion than if you go all the way down to the bottom of that.
Right, I get the general idea, it's just the details of this.
Oh, yeah, it could use a little more fleshing out, but, yeah.
That's it. Thank
Well,
you.
just to follow on that, I did make the request to Roy, and what I was looking for was some information on potential end scour. And so he didn't really deliver that, but he also explained that that would take an independent hydraulic analysis which is probably beyond the scope of this project. But I'm just curious, would we have additional end scour potential at, you know, the eastern end or at the other end that would cause additional erosion with the stones versus the fiber rolls? So, but his point is that, you know, the materials would have less velocity generated with the stones than the fiber rolls. So I think he answered it in concept. But yeah, the Manning equation doesn't help us out in itself at all. So it's, and it wasn't applied. It just, so I guess I just have a couple thoughts to wrap things up. I did look into this quite a bit, just thinking about the whole concept of having a shoreline structure or not. And I think we've done the right thing asking for a soft solution. I do think it wasn't really applied correctly. And so, you know, in this case, I think we move forward anyways, but in the future, I would hope that these fiber rolls, if different cases are applied correctly, so we can really see how they function. This one was somewhat applied to fail in practice. And then secondly, if it's an erosional bank, then we're concerned about, you know, doing something to protect it. If it's a non-erosional bank, then one option is just to let it be, to basically let the bank be, and the property owner can deal with that, the consequences. In this case, I think it wasn't firmly established. It seems like it's an erosional bank, but I'm not sure it was firmly established that it is. Do we have any information?
Roy said to me that that the determination was made that it wasn't a sediment source.
Okay.
I think something we could also do to monitor that, which would be easy enough to implement, is to install a benchmark to just monitor the, you know, level of that intertidal area, which is a bit of a sandy.
I think that was in his narrative.
Right, so I would just put it in the conditions, as just a reminder to the commission that I think we should have a benchmark installed to monitor
Right.
that.
It's different than a coastal beach
Right,
because it's a river.
Right.
And in some cases, you want to be careful where you have sediment and where you don't have it.
Right. But I think this site would be really important to monitor and to get data as we move forward, and then we should think of this as an example moving forward for new cases, because, you know, one option is if there's property and the bank is functioning, you know, for wildlife and for erosion, then it can be left alone. So that's something we didn't really pursue. So I think we should have benchmarks at both ends of the revetment, and then also have, well, not benchmarks, but have elevations that are set to a benchmark at both ends of the revetment. And I'm assuming there is a benchmark already established. And so if we can put, you know, some type of a marker on either end of the revetment, and then take some elevations on when it's done. Are we asking for an as-built?
yes.
Yeah, so
Within 30 days of construction.
okay, so I would request a series of data points then in the as-built to show the, you know, the top of the stones, the top of the bank, and as well as the substrate below. And
Yeah, you can go out there anytime and just level off the top of the bulkhead. You know, your benchmark can be the top of the bulkhead, because that's not gonna move. And you
Right.
can level anywhere you want and
Yep.
find out what it's doing.
Right, but
Easy enough.
yep, but have that first as-built have a series of marks along the top, as well as the substrate, intertidal substrate. So a little more beefed up, I guess, elevation marks on the as-built.
You know, there's a couple of interesting things that are coming out of this as I think through it. One is this study, again, obviously, if this is saying to us that having a soft solution is less conducive to impeding tidal flows than a hard solution with rocks, and if we traditionally have said that we want people to try a soft solution first, and that's not necessarily, given the site and whether it's an erosional site or not, it may well be that a hard solution is the first solution rather than fiber rolls.
Well, the Wetlands Protection Act
case-by-case
doesn't really
basis.
send us in that direction, does it?
Right, so the Wetlands Protection Act said you should attempt soft solutions on a pre-78 on a bank that protects a pre-78 structure. You should attempt that first.
Yeah, but it's temporary.
Right,
I mean, we
and I
we
think
admit that it's 7 to
we're
10
the
years at best case.
we would be the we would be the authority behind that. If they contended that, it would be their appeal. So we can make a recommendation to them and see where it goes.
They're saying, Ernie, if it's not a pre-1970 structure, don't put a hard structure in. They're not favoring hard structures. They tend to cause problems.
If it's a new structure, it's almost impossible.
It's-
It's hard to
yeah.
get one.
They're not allowing
Yeah,
it.
hard
So
structure.
I think there's a reason why they set those regulations. If there's a home that's really close to the bank and it's an older home, then you should be able to protect that home.
Yeah.
I think that pre-78 was just the line saying, okay, from now on, if you want to build close to the water, you're on your own,
Right.
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
And agreed, every site's different, whether you're on a beachfront, whether you do soft solutions or a river, you know, we have to make that assessment too.
Mhm.
So I think the onus is on us to also, in an alternatives analysis, to say, like at this site, I wouldn't even have attempted fiber rolls here. You're setting yourself up for failure, you're disturbing the resource area more often than needs to be. It's like, do it right the first time, but do it right.
Right, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You know, it seems we often just say soft solution first, hard solution if it
Yeah.
doesn't work, and that isn't always gonna work. It's
This
not gonna be
was-
appropriate either.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we went through several hearings with this the last time, and
Right.
there were mixed feelings about should we try soft or go immediately to hard. This wasn't, I mean, it wasn't an easy,
Mm.
One thing you might
First
not be
time.
thinking about, Ernie, is it's a new structure,
right?
you know, right in the resource area. So we
Oh,
don't,
no, I
we
understand
don't
that
often approve
completely.
those. So
Yeah.
I think an alternative analysis should really have a hard look at not having anything at all there.
Yeah.
Letting that bank function as it would naturally. That's probably a better approach for wildlife habitat, for shellfish habitat. It's maybe tough for some properties to think they might have erosion occurring, but I think that has to be a consideration for every project.
Mm.
So there's a couple different ways to look at it.
Yeah.
So are we able to move on this?
You were able to if you
Okay.
want to.
All right. All right, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the notice of intent for 11 River Pine Circle to replace the existing fiber rolls with rock revetment.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second? Mark, all those in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amy, we didn't talk about monitoring the vegetation plan. That'll be fairly routine. Or-
Yes, we'll put it in the conditions, maybe twice a year for the first year and then once a year for the following years after that.
Okay.
Kind of our traditional.
Yep.
Is that mic on or what's?
They set it up, I
Say
don't
that.
wanna touch it.
I don't see a little green light unless I'm looking at it.
There
We
is
have
a
a
green light
brand-
on this,
Oh, it
yeah.
is
We
on.
have a brand new system too.
Okay. You can't see it illuminated from this side, but it's okay.
That one is, maybe that one's, yeah, I can't see
It's
it.
on.
This
There's
one's...
a green light.
Oh, is it?
I trust you, I just think so.
Okay, next we have a notice of intent for the Dudek property at 53 North Road, proposed repair and raise existing revetment, continuation of the hearing. Mark, that's you?
Yeah, me again in place of Roy. So my understanding here is just repairs to an existing revetment. I have been to the site, and it's not a repair, I think, along the entire revetment. There's just a couple of areas that are concentrated with overtopping, and they're gonna add like maybe one course of stone in those areas. That can all be done from the up top. It's really a very simple repair for the revetment in that area, and I think you guys are just waiting for the file number, so.
And we have that, yep, and we were also, the landscaper for the property is here. And I had met with him earlier this week or last week, I can't remember. But, there is a little bit of work throughout, and that's the regrouting.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So, there is kind of work throughout it.
You're right, I'm sorry, I
Yeah, no
missed that.
worries. Do you have any more?
Well, no, the grouting is done by hand, so,
Right. And one of the commissioners had a really good point when we did on-site visits today about the type of grout, so I'm gonna let him talk about that.
okay.
But as far as this goes, we do have a file number. Dan, do you have anything?
I do.
It's Dan O'Leary is the landscaper. Thank you, Dan. Pass these along.
Good.
So Dan and I met on the site. The commission wanted a little bit more for the landscaping. The area that you see on the plan that's very highly vegetated towards the left, because they're proposing to go in there really by hand, with wheelbarrows, they're not gonna disrupt too much of that. It's half invasive, half native. First glance, I thought there was gonna be more disturbance than there is, but there's not. So the area that Dan and I spoke about on site is the thin strip of area between the dock and where you see the trees. And there's a mulched planting bed there. It's fairly ornamental. So what I suggested was removal of the mulch, maybe slight regrading of that top right there to stop the water coming cascading down it. Doing more of a native seed mix for a ground cover, and then basically beefing up the plantings that are there, almost doubling the plantings that are in that native strip there. So as he wrote in his letter, seeking permission to elevate a 60 by 40 area of lawn, creating almost like a French drain between the lawn and the planting area to lessen runoff. And they intend to plant 40 Carolina rose, which are the native rose, and 20 bayberries there, which I think will way more than double what's there. And Dan and I also talked about lawn care on the site, and the commission does have the regulation when we see new projects of no fertilization on properties that are in sensitive areas like on the river, such as this. So I think with these changes and what Mark has to say about the grouting, I can recommend approval.
Thanks, Amy. Ern, do you want to start?
I have no questions.
The only point that I was interested is the grout that you're going to use down on the repair, rather than regular type 1, 2, or type S cement. I'd be particularly concerned that it was a quick set, something with a cure time of 30 minutes. That way you don't have any deterioration from the water as it comes back, because the patching there isn't all that big. Clearly, it needs to stay put, so
Yeah.
it's a pretty easy precaution and really isn't going to impact anything other than making it stay there. Products are readily available.
You find one that sets that quick, it'll be, you start at the bottom at low tide and you just work your way up.
Right.
Exactly,
You'll be fine.
exactly.
Yeah.
They're available.
You can pour, well, they call it placing, you can place concrete underwater and it will cure underwater. But if it's a tide or a lot of wind that particular day, it can try to wash out the grout and,
Right.
and aggregate and things like that. So
Exactly.
I think they should be careful when, timing is everything, when they do it.
We can condition that. I wrote down what type you said in low tide application.
Yep, easy enough.
Yep.
Good.
Thanks, Jim.
On the planting plan, in between the new shrubs, will there be any, like a native grass flower mixer?
It's the bayberry covering, should spread and
You
cause
mean-
a ground cover.
Do you mean bearberry?
Bayberry, I'm sorry.
Oh,
So
okay.
should this say bearberry?
Yeah,
Okay,
Okay.
that makes sense.
all right.
So bearberry's gonna be planted throughout the whole thing?
It'll be ground cover
Yeah,
in
that'd
between.
be
yes.
nice. Okay.
Stan?
All set.
John?
So just to clarify, the planting area you're talking about is, excuse me, as you're facing the steps down, or there's a float there.
Yep,
As you're facing, oh, we've got
this
a,
area right here.
This is a picture of the area that
okay, so that's the, I see.
This area here. Yeah, between the dock and where it really gets woody, this area right here.
And so you're putting a French, it's not like a French drain, it is a French drain? You
No,
say
we're
6
gonna
inch?
elevate the grass. Basically, you're gonna bring it up so that it doesn't pitch right into the river. It's
Oh.
gonna kind of level out and lift up so it will dissipate left to right rather than flushing down.
Okay.
it functioned like a French drain.
Yeah.
Right.
It is a French drain.
Okay.
I see, okay. That's all. I
All right, I had the same question. All right, any further thoughts? Do we have a motion on the project?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the notice of intent for 53 North Road, repair and raise existing revetment.
Second it.
Stan seconds it. All those in favor
May I
say aye.
Make a comment? Is
Sure.
that motion conditioned on reduced or elimination of fertilizers as well?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's,
And is there,
well, it's the whole, it's a standard language now with,
Yeah, whatever our
Fertilizer.
new, whatever our new
Herb.
regulations state will be
yeah, herbicide,
conditioned.
pesticide, fungicide.
Right.
okay,
It's essentially like a Cape Cod lawn.
yep.
That's the idea.
Any other conditions? We have Mark's condition on the grouting.
Yep, I got it.
Okay.
Quick set, not type 1, 2, or S. Doesn't mean anything to me, but we'll put it in.
All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Folks, if you haven't signed it, we'd really appreciate it if you would. Thank you very much. Another announcement while we're settling here. We are gonna talk a little bit about Hinkley Pond tonight. Heinz Croft, our natural resource director, isn't able to come. So it's kinda gonna be limited to talking about what questions the commission is gonna ask of him, and it's gonna be continued until November 19th. Hinkley Pond will be continued, yeah. As well, I don't think anybody's here for the King project, but that is anticipated to be continued as well. Thank you. It's okay, you tried.
Okay, next we have a continuance of the notice of intent for 85 Quadam Road, proposed bulkhead, boathouse reconstruction, dock construction, access path and stair relocation with tree cutting and site restoration.
Yep, okay. Colorized and everything. Good evening, Dan Croto from Moran Engineering. No, it's all right. Everybody's got a copy. We will have to dive in first. Yeah, I just wanted to point out that the owner, Rick Veos, here. Of course, he'll speak. Mark Burgess is here, and Emma from Blue Flax is here. I think Rick would like to speak and go over the changes that have been made, improvements.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So when we left the last meeting, we talked and our objective was to try to cobble together sort of the varying comments from everyone, because there were a lot of comments coming from different aspects of the plan, and so we took a stab at trying to address some part of everyone's comments and focus it in, and I'll start by saying the first one is pulling the wall in a little bit more, as you had suggested. So we tried to bring that in a little bit more to naturalize more space. The second, we thought being most important as well, was the comments on the deck itself. So we tried to do two things. We tried to shrink that deck down, but also then pull it back and change its dimension to get, for the most part, out of the BVW. We were actually talking out in the hall a few minutes ago, and can actually pull that back to the shore a little bit more even, so that it's barely even touching the BVW. Because of its elevation, it allows us to pull it closer to the bank. So that was another thing we were trying to do. Another comment was to add not only more plantings, but add some trees of higher growth as well. I think Emma and Blue Flax tried to do that. I think we added substantially more plantings, you know, at the top of the bank, as well as some additional trees on the bank, trying to focus in the disturbed areas and not remove the stumps of the trees that were coming down. And then there was all that discussion of, you know, we could have just proposed rebuilding, filling what was there, and I think Amy had looked at some Google pictures from last year showing that, in fact, at the end of last year, this was fully intact, full lawn down there, no BVW, it was all sort of upland at that point. You know, we went back and forth on that and still came back with, we thought the best plan was still to try to shrink that area that had been unnaturalized, for lack of a better word, and try to let both ends of this go back, you know, let the BVW restore, and only fill the middle portion, connecting the deck to it. So I know there were a lot of moving parts at the last meeting, and we tried to cobble those together and come back with a plan that we felt hopefully addressed the major concerns, and, you know, tried to hear everyone's comments. Obviously, we're still trying to use the property, obviously. You know, we want to live there very long term and plan to keep the property in our family as, you know, as long as I can imagine. And we have a very good feel, having lived on the lake for a long time and having vacationed on the lake for even a longer time, how that property gets used. And we really feel that the way we're proposing this, while in some ways you might say, well, you're either adding structure, or you're doing this, or you're doing that, but actually part of our goal is to ensure that the way it gets used maintains what we're creating here, and we're not, you know, creating something and then it just gets trampled because people end up using it as a beach or whatever. So hopefully we've come a long way to address everyone's concerns. I don't know if it makes sense to go over more of the specifics or just let some of the questions start going and then fold in specifics and expertise as needed.
I'll say just a couple of things. So the area which wasn't used much this summer, it will be a used area. So the way it looks now, you know, unfortunately, just by use of the pond is going to get, you know, heavily trampled. So Rick's trying to come up with a compact way to use the area, but maintain the most natural area reasonable. Just to go over what is, so the bulkhead to bulkhead comes in, the existing, or the pre-existing, comes in 7.5 feet. The BVW as is was the area that is sprung up this year from the high water and the lack of use. That area that's to be used and to have sand put on it gets an equal amount of BVW, gets reestablished. That will increase. What happened was when we staked the most recent deck, it was apparent that we could move it the foot back towards the bank, which Rick had originally asked for, but I thought would be, I didn't think we could go back the foot into the bank, but because of the height of the deck, it can definitely go back, which will increase the amount of BVW. And then the area that was previously filled, that's now being in front of the bulkhead, that's now being turned back to wetland area, part of the year and part of the year to be underwater. I mean, part of the year it's under the water. That 540 square feet, we're looking at that as the mitigation for the deck. So I will leave it at that. Mark, you have anything to add prior to questions?
No, just to, you know, purpose of the project is to achieve a balance between what was there and what could be put back versus the way the property is going to be used. It's a much more modest approach than even last time.
So with that, I guess we'll ask the questions.
Summary thoughts?
Sure. First, I think, thank you for taking the commission of my comments and reworking some of the plan here, which is, I think we're moving in the right direction. So, that being said, I can't remember if it was during the last meeting or right after, a commissioner asked if I get an opinion about this, not specific right now to yours, but your project brought up the question of, well, how long, like this, there's no doubt, I don't think in anybody's mind that there was a bulkhead with a grassed area not even a year ago here. So there's no question of that. I think our question is, and I have not gotten an answer yet, about how long grandfathering really is for of structures and things like that. So without having that feedback from them tonight, what I'll do is really kind of just go over the merits of this project. We have to come back anyway because Heritage sent, and it's in your packet, kind of a list of things that they want them to provide, so we can't close this tonight anyways. But we can talk about, I said, let's kind of put that in the back burner. I don't think, I wouldn't recommend building it out to where it used to be, so this is, I think, a much better proposal. So that being said, so as proposed, you reduced the deck size originally from 400 square feet to 240. It is no longer below natural high water. The area in the BBW that's proposed to be deck is 34 square feet as opposed to 130 square feet. And if you recall, this BBW it used to just be upland area that has gotten eroded, so it's just starting now with kind of wetland grasses and whatnot. It's just establishing. But you are still proposing a new structure in the 0 to 50 foot buffer to the border vegetated wetland. But our regulation allows you to request that if you provide at least a 3-to-1 mitigation for that, which I think the BVW, letting BVWs come back and assisting them, as you're showing, as well as some enhancement of the bank, accomplishes that in terms of the mitigation. So you still are keeping the proposed path on grade as well as the staircase on that property. Something I spoke with Dan about maybe last week was somehow coming up with some wording. I know your intent is to never use this, have a more heightened use than what is here, but things do change ownership. We typically only allow one path down to the water on each property, and there are 3 waterfront properties here. So somehow saying for these 3 waterfront properties, there shall be no more than a total of 3 paths.
And I have no problem with that.
So
whatsoever.
something to that effect. I know the commission was a little concerned about that last time. Reduce cubic yardage of proposed fill. Let's see. I didn't see a huge, other than the creation of new BVW, I didn't see a huge change from the planting plan previously. The numbers look the same.
So we're increasing the number of serviceberry trees that are being planted from 3 to 9. So in the areas where pitch pine are being removed.
Yep, 9. Thank you. And with that, I think I'll stop.
Amy, I have
Thank
a
you.
quick question for you on the 3-to-1 mitigation. I guess I'm not picking up that square footage. So the deck is 240 square feet,
Yes.
and so we're looking for 3 times that. How is that mitigation square footage made up?
It's made up partially by and I'd have to defer to Emma for what the square footage of the new plantings would be that are on the list, but it's made up of a combination of the new plantings on the bank, which is significant, as well as the area now that's currently just the areas of the two bordering vegetative wetlands, the 194 square feet and the 54 square feet on the plan that's proposed to be enhanced as BVW. So those two plus the plantings on the slope.
Plus the wall pulling
Oh.
back and returning that. Because the wall's now coming back 7.5
Right.
feet, so we're actually returning that to a naturalized state.
Is that quantified?
That's 540. There was supposed to be 400 square feet between the old bulkhead and the new one, and now there's proposed to be 540.
540 is the area that was filled that will
Right.
now be wetland. So
Right.
prior to the nor'easters, it was filled.
Right.
So it would have been non-wetland getting turned to wetland. It's
Will it
540.
be wetland or just land under water?
Well, depending on the time
land
of
under
year,
water.
it could be both. And if we do
Wetland.
go with which I would prefer to, but obviously at the board's discretion, in front of the pile wall, we'd love to go with stones, so that is hopefully going to promote, you know, a more natural state there, and plant life and, you know, whatnot along the edge of that bulkhead.
Which
You're
is,
talking about stones in front, right?
Correct,
Yeah, but they also break up the wave energy,
Right.
which helps.
which is typical for that side of the pond.
Yeah.
The stones tend to,
Very hard to water ski on that side of the pond if there's bulkheads, I can tell you that.
okay. Well, all right, thanks, Amy. Why don't we go around the table? Do you want to start, Ernie?
Yeah, the one thing I recall from the last meeting was the proposed path that cuts at an angle across the bank. There was some concern over how that would be constructed, what would be done to prevent erosion, because you're gonna have a steep side on that, and another, I don't know what the drop off, I mean, the bank in and of itself has a very steep slope to it, so cutting a 4-foot path down that, is gonna be awkward.
It was bringing cutting that 4-foot path, we'd have to bring the bank up top gets cut back too.
Sure,
Right, the
so,
bottom
yeah,
was
yeah,
not,
so, yeah.
Ends up being 1.6 to 1.
But I think you were gonna come back to us with more information on how that was going to be done, and I don't see that, so I assume that.
The only thing was I added on the cross sections, I added a second cross section further
This
down.
plan on the other-
And
on
then
the
I
other
believe,
Yeah, I see that.
Emma
yeah.
added I believe there was gonna be a fabric. Is there gonna be a blanket on that?
Yep, so the upper part of the slope, once it's regraded, it'll be blanketed with 100% biodegradable erosion control blanket, and then seeded and then planted with shrubs
Okay.
to stabilize it.
You can think of it, you have a slope, and you're gonna cut 4 feet into that slope. The upper portion of the slope is gonna move landward the same amount, so you'll end up with the same profile, only with a path in between, so that the slope is like, the bank slope is like this.
Yeah.
You wanna put a 4-foot path right here, then you're gonna take the top and move it 4 feet.
That is a good excavation to accomplish it.
Yeah.
It is,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
That's how you maintain
Yeah,
the proper
definitely.
slope,
Yep.
so you go back to what's.
So we'll try to maintain the same slope,
The same angle,
replant that, and the
and-
same
Right.
angle,
And then you
yeah.
stabilize it, and you're fine.
Okay.
Talking to the chair, is the way this meeting's going okay? It's such a small room, but having them not at the table speaking
I think
is fine?
that's fine. Yeah, no,
Okay,
it's
good.
it's going real fine, yeah.
Close, you're close.
Last time we were jumping over each other, didn't we?
I presented 2 nights ago to the Pembroke Conservation Commission, and all the members were in one room, and we had to sit behind or stand behind a gate and speak over the gate to the commission, so.
Court.
Yeah, it was like us, yes, coming up to a court gate, so this is much more comfortable. Town hall, yeah.
See, they didn't have bulletproof glass there, though, did they?
Yeah, every commission's different.
We tend to be pretty informal.
Okay, that's helpful. I didn't make that interpretation with these two
So
charts
it
up
was, yeah,
at
to
the
cut
top.
the whole bank, if you're gonna have a 4-foot path, basically you have to pull the
Right.
top and maintain the slope, you have to pull the top of the bank back 4 feet.
Yeah,
As it gets closer to the existing concrete and steps, concrete and wood steps. It's gonna get a little tighter because of how close the road comes in. But the slope, the 1.6 to 1, Emma has had plenty of experience in the past planting that slope and not having an issue.
All right. And the path itself would be constructed of, just gonna leave it natural,
We're
or?
gonna seed it with fescue mix.
They are, okay. All right, good. No other questions?
Thanks, Mark.
From what we discussed last time and what I'm looking and what I'm hearing, I think you've done a commendable job making the adjustments. That's it.
Thank you. Jim?
Well, I think it's important to figure out whether the structure is in fact grandfathered, because it's obviously completely non-conforming to our current regulations. There's no bulkheading and backfilling of wetlands for recreational purposes. So I
Want me
think,
to speak to that now? or-
yeah, sure, if you can. Yeah.
Okay, so any structure, the cutoff date for the Wetlands Protection Act, is slightly different for coastal versus inland structures. Basically, we say August 10th of 1978. Anything that existed before that didn't have a wetlands permit because there wasn't the Wetlands Protection Act. So those are grandfathered structures. And in any case like that, the applicant would have by right, the ability to either maintain the structure in its current configuration or maintain whatever it is there in its current configuration or modify it to some extent less, but not more. Because it would be pre-existing non-conforming.
Right, I'm very familiar with all that, but the
Okay.
fact is, it wasn't maintained and it's not existing.
It was existing up until a year ago.
Yeah, and that's what I wanna hone in on, is there,
A year is a year.
does it simply have to be maintained and exist, or is there some sort of grace period that extends beyond its existence?
Well, the one thing I would add to that is, I would argue vehemently that it is still in existence. It may be broken, it may not be maintained perfectly, but it is very much still there. There are pilings in the ground, there are caps on it, and I could go around the pond and point to many structures that are in disrepair, but are still there, still being used. It just so happened this one fell into more disrepair because of these storms. And keep in mind, was it the DEP that said after those storms that they were allowed to
grace
repair? There was a grace period of some sort in terms
It
of
was,
repair?
well, it was 30 days that got extended to like another 30 days. And unfortunately, the previous owner did not take advantage of that. So essentially, they had a grace after these winter storms. They gave people the opportunity to fix the issues as a result, and pretty much just with notification to us and guidance from myself and Nikki. But this person did
He
not.
actually asked me about that, and I said, no, I really don't, I don't wanna just go in and do
No,
some
right.
hokey patchwork to it without the commission's blessing, and now I'm stuck in the middle of this mess that, whatever, I'd rather go in front of the board formally and say, this is what we'd like to do, and actually improve it than, just rebuild what was there, which was all he could have done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I think under the emergency portion, he would have had the right to put it back exactly
Yeah.
the way it was.
I agree with that completely, but when you go down there now, it really is not there. I know there are like 3 old 4x4s sticking out, but they're essentially, if someone just looked at it without other information, it could be ruins from 30 years ago. There's no real,
Well, you have letters in the record that 3 neighbors testified that it was.
yeah,
Nobody's
I
contesting
understand
that
that it
at
was
all.
there, but if it doesn't exist, is it considered pre-existing?
I just wanna know what the law
I
says.
get-
And I'm not really familiar with that.
Wetland, Mark can certainly speak more to wetland. When it comes to zoning board of appeals and someone whose house burnt down, that type of
Mhm.
pre-existing non-conforming, I believe it's 2 years in that
Okay.
case.
Okay, well, that would be the number we wanna
But that's not,
find out.
that's not a
'Cause,
conservation.
the project would just be approached in a different way if that was not the case. We'd still work something out, but if it's fully grandfathered in, then we really have to.
I would respectfully hope that the commission would recognize the intent that we're trying to do, the couple of thousand square feet that we're voluntarily pulling out, you know, within the 100-foot. And I firmly believe that it's grandfathered, but even if it wasn't grandfathered by 3 months, or, you know, we were up, I would hope that wouldn't change the intent of what we're trying to do here, because we're really trying to, you know, make something better than what was there for the last, you know, 40 years or whatever it may be.
I think there are.
I've done a ton of repairs on old structures. Some were grandfathered, some weren't. I've never had that come up. It takes a long time for a dock to get in such disrepair that they want to fix it, and when they do, they usually put it back the way it was. No one's, in 18 years of doing this, I've never had that question come up. But think of it that way.
It's just, it's really not there, you know, it's, I mean, if you look at it, it's just not there.
Well, all the pilings are still there, but just the boards got ripped.
They're not, you know. We went down there and we were like, oh, was this here 30 years ago? But then, you know, you showed us evidence that clearly was there recently. But, you
Well,
know,
it's a worthwhile question. We have to continue anyways to hear back from, I guess, your response to Natural Heritage Program. So I think it's a worthwhile question to consider.
Or if the commission, I mean, is there any, to continue going around, but this is opportunity, if there's any, they have to submit more to Natural Heritage, is there anything else? Does the commission agree with Natural Heritage with their, do you want to see that information too? I'm assuming yes. Is there any changes to this that they could tweak, you know, so this is a chance to talk about that.
Sure.
Our intention with, Natural Heritage right now has the original plan, so our intention with coming tonight basically was try to give Natural Heritage, along with their definitions that they wanted, a plan that at least were close to what the commission would approve, you know, barring these other issues. But we want to get to Natural Heritage, we want to submit to them the best, closest information to the final product.
So you have your delineations in this present plan to address the natural heritage questions.
Their question was more what was natural high water and what was natural low water, which is directly, obviously related directly to the waterways, you know, CMR 310 9.0. The, you know, the definition, their definition. So all Mark's gonna work on that, but basically we just have to send them the definition sheet from water, from.
The information that they wanted is on the plan. I think they misinterpreted it.
And then they wanted, so another one, they wanted an ordinary high water,
Ordinary high water?
which is basically between the two. I believe they didn't believe that's what it was. But we'll tell them, we'll certainly get that information to them, and you'll hear back from them, of course, before the final.
well, beyond that, as the project stands, the path I still think is a really high impact thing to happen on what is already a natural, nice, stable bank. That's a lot of excavation on that bank. We usually try to just be a perpendicular raised staircase with virtually no excavation. This is a lot of disturbance on that bank. I understand it might be possible to stabilize that afterwards, but not easy. And so I don't think that's the.
That's Emma's job, to stabilize it. Just remember, we've had this discussion on other projects, we just remember the performance standards tell you that they don't really say what you can do or they do say what you can't do. They don't really say what you can do. They basically say, do this, but you can't have any significant negative impacts. So they're not really talking about the scope of what you're doing. You could put a helicopter landing pad on a coastal bank if you could prove that you could do it without any significant negative impacts.
Yeah.
Not a project I would take on, but that's in general what we're trying to say is that, yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. A lot of it is going to benefit the area, and if it's restored correctly, there's no significant negative impacts.
Well, that's just a big impact to put that 70 feet of cut into a natural, stable coastal bank, and I don't see the necessity. I certainly wouldn't want to see that repeated again and again. I think it's a real impact to that resource.
I can speak briefly to the stabilization of it. I can't dispute the fact that it will require some removal of sediment, but once the cut is made to regrade it, the stabilization is not an issue from our end, so repairing that shouldn't be an issue. We often are taking coastal banks that have where a cornice has been created. We're usually taking that cornice off and recreating it to a stable angle of repose, and then we have this process of blanketing, stabilizing with ground covers, and then revegetating completely to stabilize the soil, and that works really well. So I can speak to that process.
Yeah,
but it is certainly.
I think it's a challenging stabilization project, which should cut on a bank that's already completely stabilized, so it's not really like that.
Yeah, it's a non-typical request that the owners are having for the purposes that he certainly stated. I think the mitigation or that he's looking at in the overall site was pulling every upland structure out of the 100-foot altogether. So there is overall there is a lot of environmental benefit, obviously. So he certainly.
I think to consider the upland things, which there's a lot to consider there, but we really would need a deed restriction to consider that, because otherwise it's really just.
Deed restriction meaning on that no structures to be built within 100 feet, within the 100-foot buffer, once they're pulled out.
Right, or whatever you've talked about as far as not developing the rear of the property, the side, because we can't really just count on zoning regulations. They're, up for a change.
Right, and I don't have any, my intentions are not changing, they're not veiled in any way. I have no intention, I have no problem with, documenting that. As I did say, this lot, there may be another house on, but that, it is remaining an existing lot. The other ones, once combined, I have no problem deed restricting that, because the only way it could go back would be to ask the ZBA to give me a variance to create multiple non-conforming lots, which, if I were a betting man, I'd bet $10 million that they would never give that variance in it, and I think I would win that bet. But I have no problem with a deed restriction on that, because it would never, as a matter of fact, the house, once the house is built, it breaches all of those lots. So you would literally have to rip the house down to recreate that. So I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, well, that would certainly be considered if you can, that would be like a building envelope restriction on the property, or other type of conservation restriction. That's definitely significant mitigation, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, no, and I wouldn't have a problem with that. Once we pull those out of there, I'm pulling them out of there because I want them out of there.
Right.
And I just don't think there's any reason, if you have the land, to be building that close to the water. So, I don't have any problem.
If you want to look at that and determine what areas that would definitely be considered.
So really, we would just we'd have to figure out how you then. I guess to some extent, once this house is down and gone, the lot remains a lot, but you no longer have a pre-existing non-conforming use within the 100-foot buffer. So we would never have the right again to do that, but we could figure out the verbiage that states that.
Well, technically you would, because we have a 60-foot no build, so technically you would have room. I was thinking more along just on the actual waterfront little pieces, but maybe the commission is also thinking on the other side of Sequotum Road, but I was thinking more of a restriction on the pieces that are right along the water in terms of, no additional access points.
A deed restriction to
naturalize those, beyond the accesses that would be permitted, no additional other things involved.
And I don't have a problem with that either. That makes perfect sense.
Okay,
Jim, good points. Stan,
Okay.
any comments?
Yeah, again, I guess I'm concerned with this path as well. And assuming you can stabilize the banks after you've cut in, I guess I'm focusing on you, and you said the path itself is gonna be grass, but it's gonna be walked over and worn and maintained. I still see that as a potential for erosion of the path itself. Not so, I'm not focusing on the banks. I'm
Yeah.
assuming you've
Yeah,
got
so
real magic on
We did have a
those.
discussion about that, and we decided that we're only expecting low to medium traffic across this path. If it was going to be highly trafficked, we would have the same concerns. Seeding it may not work well because it would get worn down, but this isn't going to be used every single time that somebody's going down and there aren't large amounts of traffic crossing over it. And so we're gonna seed it with a mix of fescues and a very small amount of Kentucky bluegrass, which should stabilize it.
Because
You use it
I'm
as
terrible
stairs
at
also?
growing grass in my house and back previously, and I seed it every year and I could never get it to
I mean,
grow.
to Emma's point, the traffic on it is not intended to be every day. It's, we have the staircase that's to be used on a regular basis. This was, the points that I made the last time, for that handicap access, for the elderly dogs, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not meant to be the primary path.
But without fertilization and all the other things we talk about, I mean, how well is this grass gonna perform on a path like that?
Fescues will.
You can always condition it to monitor the path, and if it looks like it's getting eroded, you have to fix it a different way, whether you use a crushed stone or something or what. But you can condition that to make sure that it's successful.
We do find that around the pond, because of the moisture coming off the pond and whatnot, the grasses do seem to do a lot better than I've had in other places when I've lived other areas without a lot of intervention. We actually see grasses coming up where we don't want them. And it's hard to control. So we would want to maintain the path. I don't want erosion. Obviously, that's a nightmare for me. I don't want a worn-out path that people are getting mud all over their feet and things like that. So it's in my best interest if I didn't feel that, and this was a fairly lengthy discussion we had about it, if we didn't feel that the grass could handle the amount of traffic we're talking about, I'd certainly want to propose something else. But, after the discussions, we did feel like the grass would hold up in this circumstance.
And I can give you more information about the specific species, like I can give you a list of the species that we're gonna be using. But they'll do quite well in this area. Currently, what's growing on the coastal bank is mostly Pennsylvania sedge. We can't see that but the density of that Pennsylvania sedge that's growing there gives me pretty good confidence that we would be able to establish a grass cover on that. It's getting that sunlight.
One other thing I was just thinking about as I was looking at this, the bulkhead itself, bringing it back with the new bulkhead, and I'm looking at your little diagram with the rock in front of it and everything and natural high water.
Yep.
So there's gonna be, I'm trying to figure, how high above the water is that wall gonna be under normal circumstances?
Probably a foot or so on the.
So it's like a little drop
2
off is
feet
what I'm
above.
saying. So
Yeah,
nobody's
it's
gonna
a little
be,
more than that.
so that's not an access area to go over the wall into the water. It's
No.
from your deck that you're proposing.
Correct. And one of the things that you do try, and we saw it in these storms, even with the person a few doors down you had just permitted the bulkhead, is that the waves were coming right over. So we do want to keep it at a certain height so that you're not getting the waves over that bulkhead, washing it out, and then we're back here.
No, I was thinking normal use during the
Right.
summer, say, or
Right.
whatever. So
Right.
you're not really going over that area, it's from your deck.
Going over it in probably one spot, right? From this.
Yeah, they will be accessing.
But if you're putting rock over there, I'm not
Well,
sure how
yeah,
big that
once-
rock is or anything, but.
I think there's gonna be, we will be back there's licensed docks for this already. So I think we'll
Right.
be back with with relicensing the
Mhm,
dock.
mhm.
And I think that would be the access dock, steps down.
Right.
But
But
at
that's
some
the
point
only-
from the beach area, there would be one access point, but you would not be
Using the
wandering
rest
all
of the
across
dock,
it
right.
into it
That's
because
what
it's
I'm
not
getting at.
practical, yeah.
In the previous drawing, the previous submission, the same drawing we're looking at, I showed the steps. Rick thought it was more important I showed the way
The
he wanted the
rocks.
rock set up, so I admitted that. Just due to time, I didn't add both sections, so the access would be right from the
From the
place it's
beach.
being filled down, so they won't be cutting another path down
Right.
the water at all.
Yeah, because we did talk about that last time. We're not considering the dock at this point.
Right. There are two
As to-
licensed
As to
docks.
where that is going in terms of how you're accessing all of this, and that was a question I had last time. Because originally, I think the dock is on the other end where the old stairs are being removed.
Yeah, I mean,
Correct.
if it's located around there, it's gonna be relocated, once this is approved, it'll be relocated over by the deck.
And we would try to keep it at an access, point where either the beach was or the deck was, so that there's a natural transition to it but you'd have another stab at that, obviously,
Right.
when we come back.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thanks, Tim. John, any comments?
Yeah, I was just, maybe it's a question for Amy more than anyone else, is just noting that on the natural heritage letter, they're identifying this as habitat for whatever, punch or knotweed. My
Yeah.
question is, if that's identified to be, I mean, they don't say that it's, presumably they haven't visited the site, so they don't know what's there or what's not there, but the question is, if it is there, does that have an impact on what's happening here, what can be done here?
That will.
Potentially.
But we don't know until we get their full review. The whole pond, we
Are
think.
they gonna
The
visit
whole
and-
pond is an
They
NHESP, so the whole pond has even 100 feet. You have to submit to them.
Who determines whether that's there or not there?
They do.
They will. They're in every time anybody does anything on this pond, they have to submit to them. So our concern, I guess, is we want to give them the most thorough project of what's likely going to be approved. Right now, they have the previous project. So they're going to, beyond what the commission decides, NHESP is going to do their own thorough study, and you'll hear that back before.
But we wanna make sure what goes to them is what you wanna ultimately see, so
This
we're
is-
not going back and forth,
I know that it's been triggered to them, that they have to look at this a little bit more in depth, otherwise they wouldn't have came back with a letter like this.
Do you have a comment on that,
So they'll, I'm kinda surprised they didn't ask you for like a vegetation,
They haven't yet, so there's a
List.
chance that they ask for
vegetation
us.
study.
for a
I wouldn't be
vegetation
surprised
study.
if they do ask you to do like a vegetation inventory of the BBW or something like that.
And then we do a change, but we can't, it's kind of the one before the other, We
Right.
have- We
We
want to
don't
give
know
them
yet.
the best possible project that we think will be approved, and then all we can do is wait for them to come
Right.
back.
I guess the simplest way to look at it is that the project that's before you right now, if nothing else changes, you don't get any new information, are you okay with it? And that's what we want to send it to National Heritage. Now, they could come back and maybe we have to come back to you and change it to make them happy, but we don't know that right now. So that's basically the answer that we're looking for tonight, is say, are you happy with this? And we'll bring it.
I don't answer that question until we hear back from them on their response to the information you provide them.
But our
Well,
issue,
I'm just saying, are you happy with it without knowing anything from them? Because they will in turn
That's
comment
an,
and it
that's
can
an
come back
important
to
piece
you.
of information.
but our issue was the original thing we sent them, between the owner and the commission, there was so much difference that we think it's a waste of their time to be overanalyzing that. So we were trying to get something closer to what
I guess what I'd be
No,
hoping
could
to
be
walk
agreed
away
upon.
from tonight is to ask the board in an informal basis, assuming they don't come back with anything, what we're presenting before you, would this be something the board could support? And if so, we will then submit it to them, knowing that their comments have to come back, and that may change your comments 100%, but at least we know what we're giving to them. The last thing I want to do is give them a plan that you guys can't support in the beginning, because now we're coming back changing it, then we have to resend it to them, and then they make comments, and then we're gonna have to, go through it again.
See, that's difficult. Their questions related to the BVW are principal to my concerns with the deck at that location. So I'm not gonna commit to that until I see their response. Did you have any more comments, John?
I just want to clarify the business about the docks, because I think I heard you say there are 2 docks, and understand the previous dock was, so you mean the 2 different
Mhm.
Yeah.
properties, okay.
So do keep in mind that we are proposing, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but that the deck that we're proposing would come back yet again. We're over only 34 feet of the BVW,
Yeah.
correct? And we're proposing that we would pull that back
It would
even
come back a
another
foot.
foot.
So
So
it'd be-
we'd be down into 20 feet of BVW.
No,
That would
less.
probably-
So with or without their comments, and I understand it could change your opinion.
And recall last meeting, I still had a lot of concerns that the deck is a new structure.
Right.
There's no existing deck, right?
Correct.
So it's a new structure, which we have not permitted a structure like this in many years. So there's 2 requests here that are things we have to consider,
Mhm.
the pathway and the deck. And we've heard from some commissioners that are concerned about the pathway. I'm concerned about the deck. The pathway, to grant 2 variances, so to speak, is something that would not be typical. I like what you've done with the plan. I like the improvements, particularly pulling back the bulkhead. So there's some nice mitigation features, but it's quite unusual to have 2 new structures in a zone that should have no new structures. And to me, the pathway has some hardship elements, as you've described. So I'm almost leaning more towards finding a way to make the pathway work with my concerns of the deck remaining. And I want to hear back from Natural Heritage on their feelings for the habitat that the deck represents. So that's where I stand. I think I agree with your concerns in the pathway, but with the 2 structures, the one that I see more difficult for us to permit is the deck.
Brad, I'm sorry, how is it, which 2 new structures do you mean?
The pathway,
2 variances, not structures.
yeah, the pathway would be a new activity in the 0 to 50, right?
Right.
It's not
Consider
a
that.
structure, right?
No, not a structure, but it's a new activity, and our regulations allow for a 4-foot pathway to water. So this is 2, technically. I mean, our regulations don't specifically say you can't have 2 or 3, but it says a pathway to water.
Right. And for
So
me,
it's not a structure, but it's a new activity.
for me, I think you've explained there were multiple lots, and then there's a little bit of a hardship element, so I think I'm a little more inclined to support the pathway, but I'm still having some difficulty with the deck.
And on the deck, just, for one other thing just to consider, that we, to some degree, looked at the bulkhead being out 7.5, 8 more feet, and that entire structure, if you will, then filled as structure. And that's when we changed and we sat down and really started hashing this out and said, well, let's really make the deck try to replicate what we eliminated for structure there. And so that's our perspective on it, is that we're not actually building new structure, we're replacing bulkhead structure and filled structure with a permanent raised deck that we think the trade-off between the 2, the raised permanent deck, is far less impactful to the environment than a bulkhead 8 feet out into the water and filled. So that's where we're coming from with it.
I understand that, and I just think, I look at our regs, and the bulkhead was a water-dependent structure that was previously, or I guess it wasn't permitted, but it came in before, pre-existing, so that's a little different from a new structure in the 0 to 50 that might cover up some important habitat if Natural Heritage tells it that it's important habitat. So, a 20-foot long deck, these tables are 8 feet in length, right? I think so.
Yeah.
So that's a good-sized deck. That's a good-sized deck structure and it's not an area we've typically approved those in recent years. So that concern remains. I like the effort to mitigate. I think you've done a really good job putting that together. So for me anyways, I would like to hear back from Natural Heritage, hear some clarification on Jim's point on the grandfathering. And, but I think we're getting close. I think we've heard you guys are quite close.
This is,
Go with this then.
I think we'll pull that deck 1 foot in and that'll be what we submit to Natural Heritage.
We may even look at, and I don't know if this would change your feeling a little bit on it, that if we could accomplish getting that deck completely off BVW, I mean, does that address part of your concern? I mean, I know it doesn't address all of the concern, but if we're not over BVW with it.
That would, I think, help the resource impact. Still concerned about our regulations and what they let us do. And so a 12 by 20 deck is a new structure right next to that resource area.
I think
I think we have to look closely at the mitigation package and decide whether that's adequate. It's not something we've approved previously, at least in 10 years that I've been here.
I think it's a rare, what Rick's offering is unusual
And we
too,
do
but-
recognize that this is there's a lot going on here. I think you guys said that right up front. Everyone that looked at it is just like, this is a lot going on, and we recognize that, and I knew that going into it, and that's, you know, part of the reason why I tried to address this all at once and look at getting the houses out of there and trying to do all of that to hopefully offset. And, you know, one of the big factors on the deck for me is that because I've spent so much time on the lake, I know what people do. I know what they do with chairs. I know what they do with, you know, whatever. And the deck protects the area so much that we've just seen that it's a much better use than just going with people running, you know, kind of running wild down there. It corrals people very nicely. It gives a point for dock storage. It really does protect the wetlands. Don't get me wrong, it's not my only reason for asking, but as you can see from the other things I've proposed, I do care about the area. I try very hard to kind of strike that balance, and that protection part of it does mean a lot. So we will look at, can we clear the BVW completely? Hopefully that helps a little bit and leaves yet still a few questions to be weighed out on your end.
I think also that if NHESP comes back with the endangered species in that BVW, then it absolutely has to
It
be out
changes
of it.
things.
I haven't dealt with a negative from them, but I'm sure that there's no way we can build over that.
To the best of our knowledge at this point, and you guys have done the review of the area, and
Yep.
we don't have any of those
Yeah,
plans.
during the delineation,
Right.
it wasn't found.
It's important to go over the message that we have some commissions here that have concerns about 2 features of the project. So those legitimate concerns. Any comments from the audience on this project? No?
Our next available is Monday, the 19th. I don't know if you want that one, or because of Heritage, we want to go almost a month out, December 5th would be after that.
If we can continue to the 19th, just by some chance, if they get
That's
back.
fine.
But if not, we'll obviously.
It's Thanksgiving week that week, so that's why we have it on a Monday
Yeah.
instead. That's fine if you want to continue, and then if we get closer and we don't have any more feedback from them.
The Wednesday before we don't have anything.
Yeah,
we'll,
you let us
you
know.
Signal that I'm not there yet.
Try for the 19th.
Okay.
All right, thanks for hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I move that we continue the hearing to November 19th.
Second.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries, thanks.
No problem.
Okay, so. Next, we have a notice of intent for the town of Harwich, Hinckley's Pond, treatment of Hinckley's Pond with aluminum sulfate and sodium aluminate to bind phosphorus. And I guess we have a request to continue, but we
Yes,
should have some discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So Heinz, our natural resource director, couldn't make it tonight, So he is asking for continuance. We don't have a DEP number or heritage anyways, so we have to continue. But he did ask that if you have, some of you have sent me questions, and I've sent them to Heinz, and we've had a little bit of back and forth with that. So if there's any, if you want to have a quick discussion tonight and instruct me to ask any further questions of Heinz, this would be a good time to do it.
Sure. I'd like to put it right out there that I would like to see some form of a plan. I think we're being asked to vote on the concept, and as we do research, I think it's probably the right thing to do to try to control phosphorus in the pond. But I do think we should have some type of a draft plan on dosage, timing, treatment, monitoring. So that's one thing I want to put on the table for people to think about.
Okay?
Any thoughts, John? I know you've been digging into the data.
Well, I've communicated a bunch of questions, I guess, to Heinz through Amy. I think it's how
Sorry, it
it's
has to
worded.
be that way, yeah.
Maybe I could just mention a couple of questions. I
Please.
don't think we're gonna resolve any of this now, but, just, I mean, I actually been trying to look at all the data that's out there, and I don't know that I've made anything of it yet, and I don't know that it's gonna be easy to make anything of it. Partly, I'm not a limnologist in the first place, so, but part of why I wanna see the data is just to see that there is data, and whether it's something that somebody is paying attention to, because to me, it seems critical to follow, if this is gonna happen, it's critical to follow up the consequences one way or another. And I know that the town and most Cape towns have been collecting a lot of data about the condition of freshwater ponds, but it's not clear to me what happens to that data and whether there's any use that's been made of it, whether or not it's being used to understand the fundamentals of what's going on in the ponds. I mean, generically, I think people do, but particularly when you're taking a fairly extreme action like dosing a pond with this alum treatment, I think it's important to be able to track what the response of the pond is. And so, okay, just having said that, one question I have is looking through the, I guess it was a paper that Ken Wagner wrote about alum treatment of Cape Cod ponds, and there's a lot of data in there. Part of the data is for Cape Cod ponds that have been dosed with alum, he gave dosages. And specifically for Long Pond, the dosage was stated in a table in that paper anyway, was 10 to 30, I think it's grams per square meter is the, of aluminum. And I understand from information Amy forwarded that what Ken Wagner is proposing to be required for Hinckley's is, I think the number was either 107 or 117
It's high.
Oh.
It's over
grams
100.
per square meter, and then he's suggesting that perhaps more, close to 140. So I guess a simple question I would ask Heinz or Ken or somebody is, why is that range so huge? What is it about Hinckley's that's that different from Long Pond that it needs so much higher a dosage? And my other question is, what about the details of the response of Long Pond to the treatment that happened there? I mean, we have these tables and spreadsheets of conditions at Hinckley's Pond, but there's no information that I've seen yet anyway. Somebody must have it for what happened in Long Pond. And I think what's more critical than what's in these spreadsheets, which is mostly about sort of physical chemistry of the pond. What about the wildlife in the pond? What happened in Hinckley's after? Excuse me. Yes. What happened in Long Pond after the alum treatment? What was the response of wildlife there, particularly herring?
I'm gonna guess there's no information whatsoever on that, so it's not available. We can condition this project to have some type of monitoring in Hinckley's, but you're not gonna find that. What you'll
So,
find.
I mean, that's an important piece of information. There is no information,
Well,
because I don't even have that.
I shouldn't say
much
no,
information.
I think there's really important proxies like Secchi disc on water quality. There's total
Right.
phosphorus measurements,
Yeah, yeah,
and there's
sure.
probably chlorophyll measurements. So those are good proxies for how the pond responds. And so we should probably look at those data and graph them out and see how.
Yeah, yeah.
I think you'll find a good story in Long Pond, I believe, for
But
water
do we
clarity.
know what happened to herring in Long Pond as a response to that?
That there's no data that could really be linked to that. You can't connect the two things. The quality of data is not sufficient to make conclusions like that.
I'm not sure what you're saying though, Brad. I mean, it must be possible to at least track the population of herring in the pond during the seasons when herring are in that pond. And you may, there's the correlation versus causation, which is the thing you're talking about, but still it would be important to be observing what happens to the species that are potentially affected, and I would think that would be a matter of primary concern.
I can produce a graph on spawning run counts of adult herring and then put it on a graph and map it out with the treatment, and we can talk about it, but there are so many factors that would influence that recruitment.
I think a big key would be, so I mean, well, first of all, not all the herring that come up go to Long Pond. Some stay in West Reservoir, some go to all the different ponds.
Sure.
So I think the thing that would be most critical to look at, and it has not happened to my knowledge, is a fish kill after treatment of Long Pond. I don't think there was any, but in particular herring, and I don't believe we had any. But they're, I don't know if population. It would be hard to correlate population.
Make me a little nervous when John's saying it's gonna be 700% more treatment.
It's a lot, so we could ask the
Hinckley's
justification
pond,
for that.
And it almost certainly has to be done with herring present in the pond. Is that correct?
Unless, so,
You'll see a condition by the State Division of
It can't
Fisheries to have it happen.
I thought it had to be in a given temperature zone, not
yes, so
spring or fall.
the funding is community preservation funds, which are supposed to be expended by June 31st, the next fiscal year, July 1. If it doesn't, I mean, that's something we shouldn't worry about that as much as like making sure we get it right.
Yeah.
But, so the opportunity would be potentially if we have a warmish winter, if you do permit this, doing it before the herring run, it's about a 10-day project, or after, I mean, the whole, from April through June
April
is,
through June is
you're
out,
done.
and
So
then-
the other option, if we ever have to get to that is, and I don't know the workings of CPC inside and out, but I mean, is there potential to ask for an extension for those funds through the fall of next year, potentially? Because fall is the ideal time to do it.
Yep.
And unfortunately, we
Are there juvenile herring present in the fall?
Yeah, they're
Which
there
are
right.
probably more sensitive, or I don't know.
But that would be,
Yeah, it's the eggs and larvae that are most sensitive, even though it's really not well studied or documented. So I know the Division of Fisheries tries to get them to do their applications when the juveniles have grown to a little bit of a size where they can swim away from an area of impact. So,
when do the juveniles kind of finish going out?
in a wet year, they could be gone by now. In a dry year, it can be even later than now.
Wow.
A couple of years, 2016, they went out as late as December. So,
It's really the window, the temperature window for water temperature is pretty much cut off beginning of December.
right.
It gets too cold. The warmer it is, the more uptake you have
Right.
phosphorus.
Well, that dosage will be interesting to
Right.
see an explanation why it would be.
Having a plan, I
No,
think
I'll
it's important to
definitely
see a
ask
plan
that.
and see the timing.
I wrote all that down, yep.
I'd like to work with Heinz to maybe graph out some of this data and just look at it in these
Well,
ways.
Well, my concern is, we're talking about maybe looking at the impact after the application, and then it's too late if there's a negative
Right.
impact.
No, they're not.
You know, and going back to, you know, because we've had discussions on other areas about things, we're asking to make decisions on things which we don't have definitive data on, being able to measure these things, whether it be this or something else, and I won't get into other specifics. And I guess my concern is having an application of something, not knowing what the impact is, makes me nervous. I mean, just like, and I won't get into other details, but whether it be pesticides in the area where over the years certain pesticides have been eliminated because of, they find down the road what the cause, you know, what it could, impact it could have on health. And I guess my issue, you know, I'm getting more concerned about this now too. We're just saying it's been done in other areas, other ponds, but if we don't know what the impact is.
Well, they're not seeing fish kills, you know, overt fish kills of larger fish. Early on, there was one in Barnstable that had a fish kill.
Yep.
They really haven't documented that since, so I think that the consensus is growing that it can be done in a way that's not so impactful. The fish kills, I think, occur with pH dropping. And I think, Larry, I want you to chime in because I know you understand these things. But the pH drops when you apply this compound.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it
that
drops
was
to,
the issue, that was the issue, that's right, Brad. The issue before was you apply alum, which is, it's acidic, this is aluminum
Right.
sulfate. And so it's acidic, and there was it clicked off the pH, it caused fish kills. But that was in the, I think in the 70s. And that's why they add the sodium aluminate, because that's the same.
Balances it.
Remember your freshman chemistry, the sodium is basic and the,
Buffer, it's a
so
buffer.
it buffers it and keeps it neutral pH. But they haven't seen that. You know, I think, Brad, your point is a valid one, is that we need a plan. If you look at Long Pond, they have a specific plan going forward. And I think the rub you're getting into is probably gonna have to spend some money. Okay, in some fashion for Ken Wagner's group to come back with a detailed plan. John, you raised a good point on why they add more now. I think if you look at one of those papers, Ken's recommendation is that you base the level of treatment on the amount of dissolved phosphorus in there. So I would gather that, we have to look back at the data, but I would gather that he's made that calculation based on the phosphorus he's measured at the bottom of the pond.
right.
And so I think he'll be able to explain that in a way that makes sense. You know, the monitoring was but, you know, if you look nationwide, it's been successfully used, but the plan is critical. We think that was Long Pond, the time of year, the temperature. So I think you're gonna have to make, I wouldn't make a pitch. One thing we did do with Long Pond, which still quite frankly irritates me a little bit, is that we had agreed at the time to work with Brewster to come up with a conservation plan all around Long Pond. We never really did that. We didn't get together and develop an overall plan. And I think in all this, if you look at alum treatment, I think it's effective. They've used it in other parts. But I would challenge your group to come up with a good plan to restrict phosphorus. You know, you're doing it now anyway, but it's not stated in a way that we gain credit from that in the regulatory.
Right.
Yeah, that was kind of next on
so-
my list, Larry, was to,
Because that's the key, in my mind, that's really the key.
It makes me,
To plan and do it right and carefully, to be
Yeah.
sure that you take the extra step to be sure you restrict phosphorus being into the pond.
it does seem like ultimately it's the right thing to do to deal with the phosphorus, just because we don't have another way of dealing with it right now. You know, eventually we'll get the plan figured out and we'll do that, but apparently, is the Natural Resource Department the proponent of this project, or is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I assisted him because he's with the filing. And we,
Yeah, I was
So-
thinking about talking with Heinz about working with the Conservation Commission and possibly all of the other departments in town, the Parks Department, Department, Cemetery
Yeah.
Department, and maybe coming up with a fertilizer policy townwide for everyone, number one, and then also for town properties, because the town is having some impacts too.
Yeah.
And just, because it's not just Hinckley's Pond, it's gonna be all the ponds.
Everywhere.
And I don't wanna treat all the ponds, you know?
No, I refer to Long Pond because we promised that step, we never really did it. But Hinckley's Ponds, we used to do, that's my challenge, we push to be sure you guys come back from it. And here, I'll work with, helping out in Brewster now,
Chris?
Chris.
Yeah.
And, kind of have them come on the same page so that we could, be good to go to the state and say, we have a unified policy that protects the ponds that we share with other towns.
That's
And they're doing it too, but we don't have a state.
So, I just
Good
have,
idea.
I have a couple of other comments. One is, one way to look at this process is that it's actually an opportunity, and that there are things that are unknown about the effects of alum treatments, and this is an opportunity to try to at least contribute to furthering the understanding of particularly the effects on herring spawning and juvenile herring or whatever, and to collect data and make sure that the data is collected in a coherent and consistent way, so it's actually useful to people in the future. And the other thing is that it's also an opportunity to explore alternate solutions that probably wouldn't apply to Hinckley's, but it's sensitizing the commission anywhere. Maybe it's just sensitizing me, I don't know, to the issue. And there are other towns, like the town of Orleans. People in Orleans are looking at other approaches to resolving excess phosphorus in freshwater ponds. It's a problem for everybody, and we should be looking at alternatives as well and trying to leverage this this process with Hinckley's Pond into sort of furthering that goal of understanding better ways to address compromised freshwater ponds. And even though the goal is to reduce, I mean, you'd love to eliminate the flow of phosphorus into our freshwater ponds, but it's not going to happen. And furthermore, if you look at what Ken Wagner and others have written, some percentage, like half or some large percentage of the phosphorus in the water column that causes these algae blooms comes from phosphorus that's already in the pond. And so if you don't want to treat all the ponds with alum, but you still want to address the issue, which is an issue in most ponds on the Cape, then there has to be some other approach, and we should be thinking about that and trying to be proactive about it.
Okay, so we've got some marching orders for Heinz, so to speak. All right. Okay, so do we need to continue?
Yes, for the 19th, please.
Okay. I move we continue the Town of Harwich Hinkley Pond alum treatment proposal till November 19th.
Second.
Second that, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, so next, I guess, just straight up continuation for the King proposal.
Yes.
We have a notice of intent for the King property at 30 Loftus Avenue, construction of a wooden deck at the back of the house and minor alterations to eliminate water from entering the basement. The proponent is asked to continue until November 19th as well.
No, it's December 5th,
Okay.
and I will be having discussions with council.
Okay.
Make
I'm-
a motion to continue the King project until December 5th.
Second that. So in way of discussion, Ernie, are you going to be able to attend that meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll verify tomorrow. I didn't know if it's, like I said, a couple of us or all of us.
Yep. I can't make it. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Okay, next we have a notice of intent for the Lange property at 99 Riverside Drive, addition and driveway reconfiguration.
prepared.
I can't handle the board and the talk at the same time, so I have to have it. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Kieran Healy. I'm a land surveyor with the BSC Group. With me are the owners of the property, Jeffrey and Sandra, tonight in the audience. What we're looking to do is to put an addition on this existing building right here. If I could bring your attention to the sketch. We're looking to propose this addition right here. None of the work is within the 50-foot buffer. A portion of the work is within 50 to 60, and the majority of the work is coming out towards the upland area away from the resource. We are proposing mitigation to cover any of the impact that this structure would have. You'll notice one strip of mitigation up here, a larger strip of mitigation here. We're also looking to remove 2 of these driveways that are within the 200-foot riverfront. I just make it one that comes around a little bit more and gets it out quicker, shall we say, away from the riverfront to reduce this area right here. We're looking to reduce some of the stone that's in the middle, put in a 2-foot wide grass strip, everything just to try to reduce the impervious structure surfaces that are there. The mitigation in this area and this area and here covers everything within the riverfront and the impact that is required by our riverfront analysis. The additional mitigation along the entire bank, which is almost 10,000 square feet, is purely for this one little section right here that is between the 50 and 60. When these plans were originally done, the setback for the town was 50 feet. Your new bylaw has just brought in the 60 foot. We've been working on these plans for quite a good amount of time, and we could have rushed to push it in and try and get it in before the bylaw went into effect, but it just didn't make sense to us to give you something that you wouldn't be happy with. So what we're trying to do is to alleviate this small section here by doing all of this mitigation. As you can see, it's much more than 10-fold mitigation that's required here, more like 100-fold. There is a granite area right here underneath this proposed corner of the building, and that's in this section right here, and that's pretty much all of the area that is between the 50 and 60. So it is already disturbed. I'm not going to say that the granite patio is the same as a structure. Obviously they're different, but the area is already disturbed, and we're hoping that the Commission will find favourably because of the amount of invasives that we're looking to remove from these banks and replant with native species. We also are looking to put in a dry well in this area right here. There is a little bit of slope in this area where the water runs down very quickly, and it kind of seems to naturally catch in this area. So we want to put in a catch basin there with 2 to 4 feet of stone all the way around, 2 feet of stone all the way around, which will stop a lot of the water getting off here and onto the bank and causing the erosion off into the bank. Further with your bylaws, you understand that they're no longer either natural fertilizer or any type of fertilizer allowed, so my clients are fully prepared to be agreeable to that if that's a requirement. Other than that, I'd be glad to answer the questions. You have the notice of intent. It depicts all of the mitigation required, so I won't go into the plants and all of that this time.
Thank you. Amy, do you have a summary for us?
Sure. So they are asking for a variance from our regulation of, which is now, as of October 1st, it's 60 feet as opposed to 50. So they're asking for the closest point of the new structure to the resource area would be 50.5 feet. Part of the justification, I think, and just correct me if I'm wrong, part of your justification for that also is that the vast majority of the rest of the house is actually closer to the top of the bank than the proposed addition is to be. The proposed addition is a mix between in grass area / patio and some plantings. there are some changes to, it's still in the riverfront area, changes to the driveway. To me, those are, it's kind of switching from what they have now to something else. It's a even switch, pretty much, in terms of the driveway for me. I would like to see a little bit more clarification on the removal of the invasive species and the replanting. Typically for an area so big, and I hope I didn't miss it, but typically we do see a little bit more formalized planting plan for that. It's a huge area, we just wanna make sure that, and I'm happy to assist with species types, but we do typically like to see species types, numbers, spacing, things like that, to make sure that the area is fully covered. It helps prevent invasives from coming back when it's adequately planted, and provides a nice vegetative buffer. So to the north of the boathouse, that area is a mix of honeysuckle, bittersweet, English ivy, a few other things. But for the most part, the rest of the banking, the invasive in there is predominantly English ivy. From what I see, it's all the ground cover there. So removal of that is a definite benefit, because all you have right now are trees and English ivy. You don't have a shrub layer really at all in most of that area. In addition, the mitigation planting areas, which will further reduce lawn, is a benefit. So we do have a requirement for a 3-to-1 mitigation for anything within the 0 to 50 foot buffer. This is not out. This is outside of that. A 2-to-1 mitigation for square footage for anything in the 50 to 100 foot buffer zone. With some clarification on the invasive removal / replanting, I could see we could easily get to that. And the Rivers Act specifies, so if this was an undeveloped lot, their cap would be development of 5,000 square feet or 10% of the riverfront area on the lot. Because this lot the house is 18 something. I can't remember, what year was this house built? 1870?
76.
Yep, you told me on site and I couldn't remember. Because the site very much predates that, they really just, right now their degraded area of the riverfront area, which is the whole 200 feet from the mean high water line landward, is 12.25%. As presented, it will be 12.25%, so it's even. You'll see in the project in a little bit, if you go over, you have to do at least a 1-to-1 mitigation. So that includes the area usually outside the 100-foot wetland buffer, but within still the 200-foot riverfront area. But in this case, it's essentially a wash. We can't vote on this tonight. We don't have a DEP file number yet. At least I didn't see one as of this morning. I didn't see one.
Okay.
So we can't close hearings until we have a formal number from the state. It's just the practice, and we try to stay consistent. So I, for one, would just like to see some clarification on what and how much is going to get planted in that area that you're removing your invasives.
And that would be perfectly fine. Matthew Creighton is our wetland scientist in our office, and
Yep.
he can gladly work with Amy on the specifics of how that will go forward.
Okay, thanks, Amy. Any questions at this point, Ernie?
Yeah, the focus on this seems to be on the construction of this new garage, I assume this.
Yes, that's the project, yes.
But on your plan, you have the new driveway. I assume that's all new, is that correct?
No. The existing driveway runs like this.
Oh, that's existing?
That's existing.
Yeah.
And it also runs like this, and we're removing this portion right here.
Oh, okay, so that portion of the driveway that's already in the 50 is...
Correct, oh yes, yes.
Okay. That's fine for now.
Okay.
I have no questions.
Are we missing something, or it says C, notice of intent for plant schedule? I don't really.
I apologize if it's my bad. Give me 1 second. Matt did supply.
I do have,
Oh, we did. as my fault.
Okay.
I don't know if we maybe didn't get all the copies necessary, we only may have gotten one with the application.
I believe we had sent everything in, I remember the photocopies.
Is it a verbal description of the plants and?
It's.
If I
it
could,
is-
his
Sorry,
copies.
I
Sure,
really
yeah.
apologize.
There's listed as the southern area and the northern area.
Okay, thanks. Pass it around
I only have the one, so I don't know what happened to the other copies.
Well, yeah, that's my main concern is
We'll-
just
we'll
what
review
Andy said
this.
with, you know, when you remove all that English ivy, that's gonna be sensitive to get a ground cover back on there immediately and the way that's planted.
Yeah. I'll still touch base with
But,
Matt to
you know,
make
it
sure I
seems
have
like
all of this.
if a nice plan is developed for that whole area, along with these other two mitigation areas, it's a lot of mitigation, so.
Stan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think with all the mitigation, I mean, you know, we just went beyond the 50 at this point, you know, from the 50 to 60, and going back to the point that the rest of the house is further or closer than that is, I don't really, with all this mitigation, I don't have a concern, I don't think, at this point, so.
Okay.
So, are you proposing to remove all the English ivy? I mean, looking at this drawing here where there's an indication here.
You said something like 10,000 square feet or something like that.
Well, I'm just wondering about this. I remember walking around the side of the house and there's
Yeah.
a start of a very steep incline, which
Yeah.
is all overgrown. I mean, it looks beautiful. It's all overgrown with English ivy.
Yeah, it's all here.
And but what's this border right here?
That's edge of existing vegetation.
And the existing vegetation is English ivy, so I'm
Underneath
just,
trees. We can take a
I'm just
closer look.
want to clarify. Is what you're proposing removing all the English ivy, or are you wanting to leave some of the English ivy?
So I can show you where.
Yep.
um,
I think the best thing to do would be for have Matt from our office possibly meet you on site.
Because they'll come back with the vengeance. So what John's talking about is, on the plan, you have an existing edge of vegetation
Yep.
here, that's shown with that line, but your removal of invasives doesn't come up to that line, when it probably should.
Right.
Um,
Hurdles just go back.
Yep.
The
I'm
reason being,
happy to work
the reason
with
being
Matt.
is we came up to the top of the bank, we didn't come over the crest of the bank,
Yeah.
and there was possibly some English ivy over the crest.
What I do have from Matt, just on quick, look, it's a planting schedule for the two specific areas that are shaded in dark green there, not throughout. So, I'm happy to work with him on fleshing that out, since we have to continue anyways, so.
Okay. I guess I have some concerns on the plan, obviously, everyone else has stated that, but I know we've had some projects that have proposed invasive plant removal in the name of mitigation,
Right.
and the end result is this sparse habitat that's not particularly functional for wildlife habitat. I know at the southern end of that area, there's quite a few trees. Do you propose to remove any trees, or anything besides invasive plants?
No, we're not proposing, no.
Okay. That would be key to, remove the invasive, but keep that dense habitat.
trees there.
There's a lot of trees. It's functional habitat without the ivy. So that's something that I'll be really interested to see, is the details on what's going to be put in the place of the ivy. And I do tend to prefer lawn removal from mitigation when there's opportunities to take out lawns. So that I wouldn't mind seeing some type of alternative discussion on, is there any pieces of lawn that could be removed in lieu of that large area of removal.
We did do some of that.
This area is lawn right now.
So that's lawn
That
coming
is
out,
lawn.
and there'll be,
This land, and the northerly one as well, is also lawn right now.
Yep.
So
Any-
we have,
any chance of connecting that segment to the bank? See how you've got a space, are you trying to keep a little corridor there for walking, or?
no, it's already vegetated. This is coming right up to the edge of the vegetation.
Up there too.
Okay, so having some, explanation that you're gonna have continuous habitat with that new segment connecting to the bank. I think just the details would be helpful.
Something we did notice on site today, and Mr. Lange was present for that, we looked at the pitch pines a little bit in the area kind of near the proposed addition. And there are 2 or 3 that are infested, one that's leaning pretty good, and one that's heavily impacted right now. So I would recommend when we do go forward, if we get, if we get a positive vote on this in the future, that we also allow them to take care of 2 or 3 pitch pines that are on their way out that could have impact on the structure.
Maybe ask if they'd be interested in replacing them with
Other trees.
a red cedar or something
Right.
that'll be, will last a long time and not be a danger to the house.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're almost across the river, there's a site that we permitted that a lot of invasives came out and lawn came in, and it's open.
I need to revisit. I
not-
know exactly where you're talking about.
Not happy about the way that one came out.
No, we haven't had much feedback or back and forth with them, so they are on my, I know exactly what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
and so it's our job to try to shape this to a place where I think you guys want to look great. We want it to be functional habitat, and I think we can get
Yep.
there with the details.
But the primary 2 things is this area and the area to the north are existing lawn. This area along the bank is on the bank, so we could never put a lawn, or anybody could
Right,
even
right.
think about putting a lawn on that. So
Right.
that's definitely not in our thoughts to
Yep.
put any lawn in those areas. So
Right.
would it be okay to put some of the red cedars inside this area right here, of this planting area?
That-
to-
Well, it'd be good to have some there too, but I think if we're gonna remove a few on that side,
the
it'd be nice to
garage.
put them in that area, even if they're a little farther from the structure or something, but
Keeping that
That's the most
bank.
important, is just keep them away from the structure, so
Yeah.
in 20 years' time, you don't potentially have the problem again.
Right.
In the view, we don't want
Yeah.
anybody coming to prune them,
yeah.
Yeah, okay, so the details.
So our next available is the 19th, which is a Monday night, because it's Thanksgiving week. You're not meeting on a Wednesday. We can put it on for the docket then and hope, I can get in touch with Matt this week, or he can get in touch with me.
Yep.
We can put it on the docket.
Or if you want to wait, that's okay with us, because
Or if you
we've
wanna
got
wait till
a...
December 5th, that's fine too.
If you would mind, we'd like to get going, because if we are, if it is a positive meeting, then the construction would look like to start and possibly get in of concrete before the freeze comes, and it would just
Yeah.
make it possible to build it for next summer.
Yeah, there's no real objections to the variance request, right, given what we've heard. I think
I
that's,
think with a nice mitigation plan, it'll be pretty straightforward.
Mhm.
yeah, so I think that's the detail, those details.
Yeah, it's a matter of, and the area's mapped out, so just coming up with species type, number, spacing, I'm sure that's something Matt can do fairly quickly.
Yep.
So, I know him.
I think the other thing that's important about this particular piece is that this is really a left to the house. We currently live on Freeman Street, and we're gonna be moving here, so it's already getting near,
Yeah. You'd like to move in?
maybe.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, well, then let's not hold it up. I think just, let's work together to have a nice planting plan that we think can establish some nice dense habitat there along that buffer.
We'll make it work.
Okay.
Good.
All right,
Thank you very much,
thank you.
members.
Do we need, yeah, I move that we continue the hearing till November 19th.
I second it.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, members, thank you, Danny.
Good night. They're still out there, please. Oh, there they go.
Amy, do you want this back?
Oh,
Yeah, please, 'cause I apologize.
did he get his back, or he tightened, whatever.
All right.
That's a lot of continuation. You got that type there.
Air conditioning.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
80 degrees in here in the morning.
Okay, next we have a notice of intent for the Cronin property at 211 Route 28, proposal to construct multi-use building with associated stone parking and landscape areas and installation of new septic system.
Good evening, Dan Croto, Moran Engineering. I'm here with Ty Cronin, the prospective buyer. This is the mill store property, I believe. And Ty and his brother-in-law is going to keep the existing mill store business and have either a fishing supply or a gift retail business there, and then ideally, Ty would build this building and back for his business. He's a landscaper. It would just store his equipment in the building. There's no outside storage allowed. We did go through a planning board process. This building would just be an open garage, a 3-bay garage on the bottom floor. The top floor has I believe it's a one-bedroom apartment. And then the existing building, which is now on cesspools and has the two improvements of the existing building is to upgrade the cesspool, which is now sitting in groundwater, and to take the roof drainage and put that to dry wells, so it doesn't spill on the parking lot and out into the town's catch basin. The septic system is at the highest point in the property, that's why it's down on the lower southeast lot corner. It still requires a 2 to 3 foot wall because of the high groundwater. So we're before you for because it's in the floodplain, the coastal floodplain, 100-year floodplain, so the water would come up during a major storm that floods into Herring River, would come up actually from the north, or right down 28, and flood this property for the 6 hours until the storm goes by. And so obviously, normal storms aren't turning this into a wetland, but high astrological high tide with a major storm, it is predicted that this whole area of 28 is underwater. Water comes in, being a coastal wetland, water comes in, water goes back out. It's not like in a fixed pond where there's a storage issue. So there's not a change to the floodplain by doing this project. The stormwater of the new building goes to dry wells as planning required. The lot, which is now sloped to the southwest, basically, will be sloped to the middle. It's all has to be stone parking, and it will be, that stone parking will have a slight grade towards the middle planted drainage swale. But as for the reason we're before you, the coastal floodplain, I don't think we have an impact on that at all. So I'll ask for comments.
Thank you. Amy, any comments?
Yep, as Dan said, this is AE11 floodplain. We propose, so the existing building and parking lot is really not supposed to be too much of any of the change. They're revised striping, installed dry wells, things like that. The new proposal is for a multi-use building. The top of slab foundation at that is only going to be at elevation 8, so it will need to be designed to meet flood standards for up to 11 feet. That'll be flood vents. We did speak with Board of Health. We already got approval for planning board, but if you have any type of in your multi-use building, if you have garages, bays like that, you'll need to have floor drainage, which will need to be tight tank type things. We'll work with Board of Health on that. But in the case of a flood, that's an important thing. We don't want things in the event of a flood getting out. That's something that we can condition as well.
That is on the plan, Amy,
Yep.
too, in the.
Floor drains to be pumped to inside holding tank. Yep, as long as it's tight. The rest of it, for flood zone, really the performance standard is not to have an adverse impact to your neighbor in the event of a flood. And what they mean there is when a coastal flood comes, the tide comes in too high, what's going on this property cannot have an adverse impact to your neighbor. With the proposed stone parking, drainage from the building, swale, etc., I don't foresee it having a problem. I did also run by the stormwater plan with the town engineer, and he said it looks good. One thing that would be, well, two things. I'm curious, if you don't have any detail on that I can see, for your planted swale. So are there things that you recommend? It just says planted drainage swale, so it'd be nice to know kind of what types of species would be in there. I'm thinking since it is gonna be potentially for some stormwater, you're gonna want species that can tolerate wet, but also are okay being dry. So you're looking at kind of sweet pepper bush, maybe high bush blueberry type things in those areas. So I'd like to have some.
I think Ty could certainly, being in the landscaping business, can
Yeah.
supply you with the
Yeah,
plants for
it
the.
just says
for this
grass
area.
and plants, and then planted
this
drainage
time.
swale.
Drawing me a list of what.
Or
you're
just
gonna
give me
put
a
in.
list of numbers, yeah, so we want that to be functional. And then you are taking down several trees which do take up a lot of water, and this is more, in the event of a coastal storm, it's not gonna make much of a difference, but in terms of stormwater on the site and water levels, maybe planting between the, proposed stone parking and the southerly property line, between some shrubs and maybe a couple of trees there to replace just some of the root mass, which will help uptake water too, would be beneficial, as well as screen from any neighbors. I think you have to do a fence already because the planning board replaced the fence.
Yeah.
Replace it.
Will be replaced.
I was just thinking some additional plantings in there would also assist with your day-to-day stormwater on the site. So, other than, I mean, just a little bit of clarification on plantings, which I think we can work out. I would recommend approval of the project.
Thank you, Amy. Any comments from the commissioners? None?
Not I.
Mark?
No.
Are all of the oaks coming up in the area around this landscape public area and planted?
No, that's all staying.
They're all staying.
Yeah, the only reason to take the trees out is
Where the buildings
the
are.
building and the parking and the septic, so there was no intention to take down trees except what had to come out, which.
Okay.
I was just curious, just more curiosity, the 4 stakes that are out there are the edges of the building? Because I was just looking at.
4 with the building and 4 with the septic system?
Right, the one where the building, yeah, because I was just looking at 3 bays, and I'm saying it doesn't look big enough to have 3 bays in it from just, looking at it. Just curious.
Yeah, that
It's
was.
not a
the-
commercial garage, it's just a regular, it's almost like a carriage house, a 3-bay garage.
Just was a perspective, from my perspective, it didn't look like that big of an area for 3 bays, that's all.
It's not, yeah, I think like Ty says, when you if you're driving down Queen Anne Road and you see a bay.
Yeah.
It's a larger door, it's
Right.
a larger bay.
So it's more like a 3-car garage than it is with a commercial bay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a standard 9-foot door, like you'd see on anybody's house. So you got 9, 18, 27, and you got 15 feet to play with, so.
Yeah. I just had, just curiosity.
Yeah.
It
Yeah, I
didn't
think
look-
that's what it
Didn't look
is.
like
It's
it
just-
was big enough, so.
It just,
That's-
yeah, for a commercial setup, it's smaller than your average commercial
Okay.
garage.
That's,
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I would move to accept the plan, the project as per plan.
Okay, do we have a second?
well, Can I make
Sure.
a question at this point?
Sure.
With the condition that we talk about a detailed planting,
Yeah, I can work with
yeah,
five,
condition, then, yeah.
figure out if you.
Then I'll second.
Okay. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 None opposed, motion carries.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, actually, hold on one second. We did get a file number for you, yes, you
Yep,
got
we
it
did,
today
yes.
from the state, so that's good.
So we're okay.
We are good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Okay. So our eighth notice of intent for the evening is for Chase Street Properties, 20 Chase Street. Notice of intent to propose removal of dwelling, outbuilding, garage, and construction of a new dwelling, guest house, and replacement of timber steps and mitigation.
Hello, David Little from Ryder and Wilcox, Phil Cheney, and Lori Clark, the principal of the company. If Phil and I can't answer anything, Lori probably can. So 20 Chase Street is a developed site located on the Herring River, and as you saw, if you made it to the site, structures on the site include a dwelling, an outbuilding, a garage, and a large wood shed. Resource areas on the site include salt marsh, coastal bank, land subject to coastal storm flowage, and riverfront. And the proposed work consists of the removal of the dwelling and the outbuilding and garage, and the construction of a new dwelling and guest house, and the replacement of the timber steps on the coastal bank with stone steps. Work will occur within the buffer zones to the coastal bank and a vegetated wetland, with a reduction in coverage of 58 square feet in the 0 to 50 foot buffer, and an increase in coverage of 1,014 square feet in the 50 to 100 foot buffer. And one thing that Amy and I we've shared a couple of emails, which I appreciate. She also pointed out that in addition to your 3-to-1 requirements in the 0 to 50 for mitigation, your 2-to-1 requirement in the 50 to 100 for mitigation, there's also a 1-to-1 requirement for the riverfront. So what I didn't submit with this, I didn't submit a breakdown of the coverage separate that's in the riverfront. I did supply you with coverage calculations that shows the decrease in the 50-foot buffer, the increase in the 50 to 100-foot buffer, but I showed the overall numbers in the riverfront. So those will have to be corrected. I am going to have to provide you with updated riverfront calculations, but the project itself is not changing. The existing dwelling presently has a Title V a 4-bedroom Title V septic system. The new dwelling is going to be 4 bedrooms, and that's going to be able to utilize the existing septic system. The guest house, we have designed a new septic system for it that's located outside of all of the buffer zones. We have a tank and a pump chamber from that's connected to a leaching facility. And what we have done with the design, in the event that the existing leaching facility should ever fail, we're prepared to just expand the new leaching facility to accommodate that. So we are making necessary provisions. Should this existing septic system fail, we have suitable area for it to go back in. They purchased the property recently. The septic system did pass inspection for the property sale. So working with Phil, Phil generated a mitigation plan, and I think the crux of our meeting may fall with where Amy thinks we might be falling a little short on the mitigation that we supplied to you, but I'm gonna turn it over to Bill, at this point.
Sure. I think you probably all can hear me anyways, but I'm using my. I've got a total of about 1,000 square feet of new plantings going in as far as mitigation, as well as I've outlined 3 other areas of management that should, in my opinion, work as somewhat of a mitigation factor, where areas have historically been mowed in the past. There's a large quantity of native bayberry that's regrowing in those areas, and that's simply designating those, setting those aside, and allowing those to regrow, and some to be managed for the sake of future vista pruning would make some good sense. So I've got the 3 colored areas on the plan that you have, which show the 3 different types of management. One is the large area of 2,900 square feet of just allowing the bayberry to regrow and naturalize. Another 800 square foot area right in front of the structure where the bayberry would be allowed to grow and then be managed in a 3 to 4 foot height to preserve some views. And then there's a small border in front of that between that area and the house, which is currently native herbaceous material that can really be just mowed on an annual basis and maintained as a good natural ground cover area. So in addition to that, we've also got a few isolated invasives, some bittersweet primarily, on the northwest corner of the property. A couple of plants can be pulled manually and replaced with some of the shrubs that I'm showing with the blueberry and the sheep laurel, these areas. So currently we're offering these areas, including removing the English ivy from a large area to the south end of the property as well. There's a lot of English ivy growing in the undergrowth, so that would be part of the mitigation effort also. So got 1,000 square feet of new plantings, as well as these 3 areas would be allowed to naturalize better than they have in the past.
And then just additionally, on Phil's landscape plan and on our site plan, there are trees that we are proposing to remove. I would say the majority of them are very close to the existing dwelling. There are, Amy was questioning, we're showing 2 on the coastal bank out by the Herring River, 1 pine and 1 oak. We're showing those proposed for removal. That is for a view. But one of the things we did do, we went out and we located all of the trees within your jurisdiction. So you could see this is a very heavily treed lot. Some of them, we believe, the thinning will actually be helpful for some of the other oaks. We have a dead pine, we have a dead oak, we have an oak that's been compromised. So that essentially would be our presentation, and I am curious to hear what Amy has to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask just a kind of, well, it's on topic and it's about this property, but not related totally. This 32-inch, it's one here, it says pine, here it says spruce.
Oh.
What kind of pine is that? It is
The house?
It is
Yes.
the house. Is that a Scotch pine?
No, that's a Japanese umbrella pine. Ski
You
it
were
up.
right. Who was right?
Who
said
said that?
umbrella pine?
Mark.
One of the more impressive ones I've ever seen.
I know.
Amazing.
So I had to find out what that was. The Japanese umbrella pine. Mark was right.
There you go. You're good.
Well, obviously, that's a problem right there. I don't think anybody questions that one. The only reason I asked about the ones on the banking is because they are really close to the top of the bank, and I didn't know if it was more of a safety issue and worrying about them toppling over time and taking pieces of the bank with them, or if it was for view. Probably both.
It is.
They both make sense.
It is heavily treed. Personally, I don't have an issue with those we'll go over the project larger, but I don't have an issue with removal of those just because I can see them doing more damage as they come down. They're literally at the crest of the bank. But it would be nice maybe to replace, with some root mass there, shrubs or whatnot, just to hold the integrity there. So that was my purpose of asking that question. All right, let's go to the performance standards. So, a couple different things here. We have the Rivers Act, which you've heard me speak about in the previous hearing. This house predates, it's older than 1996 when the Rivers Act came into place. If this was being requested today, their magic number for development in the riverfront area would be 5,000 square feet or 10% of the riverfront area on the lot, whichever is less. Existing disturbance in the riverfront area now, and I lost my notes because David recalculated it for me.
7,728.
9.6% then?
That's 9.6 of the total lot
Uh-oh.
area.
You had
It's-
redone it for me.
Yes, I redid that, and we are over
Yeah.
10%.
Oh, I knew you were over 10%, but you're also over, you're greater than what you're proposing is greater than what is existing, but the mitigation, the Rivers Act stipulates as long as you replicate at least at a 1-to-1, that is potentially allowable if you're not having a negative impact on the river, the interest of the Rivers Act. So they are allowed to exceed if they mitigate. Our regulations are a little more stringent in terms of mitigation. The only reason I bring that up is because there's area outside the 100-foot wetland buffer that's still within the 200-foot riverfront area that counts. I know it gets.
And that's what I apologize,
No,
I
it's
didn't I haven't calculated that yet. But I'm sure that we can provide the necessary mitigation for that.
Yeah.
I'm not thoroughly conversant with the Riverfront Act, so that kind of caught me off guard.
I'm not criticizing, I'm just trying to clarify. So for our regulations, they are reducing coverage in the 0 to 50 by 58 square feet, but they're asking to increase in the 50 to 100. And there's a couple wetlands, there's the coastal wetlands, and then there's a inland freshwater wetland on the property, or on and abutting the property. So total, they're asking to increase 1,014 square feet. So roughly double mitigation would be 2,028. You could also subtract the 58 if you wanted to get into like the small numbers. So there also, another criteria is you're not supposed to get closer to the resource area. I think that's common for ours, but also the Riverfront, Rivers Act says you cannot get closer. I think, right now you're
And we're respecting that.
19 and you're gonna be 24 or something like that?
Yes.
I can't remember off the top. I thought I put it here.
We are retreating.
You're retreating, so that meets. And I think most of it does, the house itself is not in the flood zone. A corner of the proposed guest house is, by my quick looking. But you may wanna check elevations on that to see if you're outside of it.
Well, you're right, Amy, but what I am showing is adjusting the 11-foot contour.
Okay, to get it out.
So I'm proposing a little bit of fill north of the proposed guest house, and then that way we could get it out of the
Even
flood
better.
zone.
Great. I ran this by Charlene and planning, and she mentioned, if you already haven't, talking to her about a use special permit, because it is, going from what is marked now on existing site plans as a garage to a proposed guest house. And I know David knows Charlene, so they can discuss having to do that. We'll leave that up to you. Back to wetlands. So I think, yes, the crux of the conversation is mitigation. While I definitely think those areas that have been managed in the past with the bayberry need to regrow, I don't believe there's ever any permit to mow it, so I don't, this is my feeling, the commission may feel differently, I don't view it as mitigation to let it allowed to regrow. It is regrowing right now. It should have always been allowed to grow unless you had a permit allowing you to cut it. So,
So are you looking more at the other areas that Phil's proposing as mitigation, as real mitigation?
you're adding plants. I think it is definitely a positive to continue to allow those to regrow, and if they become an issue with view, they are species that can tolerate pruning. The bayberry can tolerate some pruning. Down the road, we can talk about that if it ever becomes necessary. But I think the species that you've picked on the southerly property line, the Canadian serviceberry, the possum haw, arrowwood, plethora, I like that you're putting in tupelos and oaks. Those are trees. And on the north side too, those are all wonderful things. So in my mind, you would just have to beef those up to help your numbers. And you keep in mind too, you also have the isolated wetland to work with too, in an as far as area for some plantings as well.
Okay.
It is a high value little habitat there, and there is some room for a little bit of invasive removal and some replanting in that area too. So I think you have room to work.
Could I ask you a question? And I haven't broached this with Lori yet, but, so there's that large storage shed on the property?
Yep.
That is in the 0 to 50 foot buffer?
Yep.
If you're to remove a structure that's in the 0 to 50, do you get 3-to-1 bonus points?
That's a good question.
Well,
I've
No, I'm
wondered that many
serious, it's
times
actually-
myself,
it's-
right.
We certainly favor it.
If I was to
Be very in
propose,
favor of it,
if I was
I
to
think.
propose a shed or this building there,
Yeah.
I would have to mitigate 3-to-1 for
Absolutely.
it. And I'm just exploring ways that we
Yeah,
can
I know.
offer up mitigation for you here.
Removal of structure is, I think, a very positive thing. So,
Along with planting of the area.
As well as backing the proposed dwelling out of the 0 to 50, even more than proposed.
Okay.
And the shed would fall into that category as well.
Okay.
yeah,
Well, that's something we may discuss.
yeah, we don't have a DEP number anyways for this one yet, so.
Right.
But I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, thanks, Amy.
I think
So-
we can get there.
Yeah, so it sounds like we really still need to determine just what square footage we're looking for the mitigation.
Yep, it's almost, I mean, I can do it right now.
Do you want to start with questions,
I'll
Ernie?
give you the-
Thanks.
Yeah, I agree with Amy's comment that a lot of what you've labeled as mitigation here, I don't necessarily feel really is. You know, mowing in or
Yeah, I mean, to me, it would be a little bit different if these owners were the ones who'd been doing all that, but it's kind of what they inherited, so they're kind of giving it back. So that was my rationale.
Yeah, okay. And then the other primary concern that I have is they're tearing down an existing structure and obviously get credit for removing it from the 50 to an extent, but you've got the room to put the new dwelling outside of the 50 entirely. And I just don't know why you were not pulling it back so that it's not in that, in the 0 to 50 at all.
Well, I guess the easiest way to answer your question is there's a really pretty view down the river that we're trying to capture, and the more we move it back, the more we lose it. So that's what we've been working.
Shifted south? South, more, and still maintain that view, I would think.
You could, but we've really worked a long time with Lori and her sister on this for that location and to get the views, and the regulations, we are retreating as per your regulations require, and I think where we would like to come to meet with you on this is to provide the proper mitigation for it. We're in an area that's already disturbed, and we're respecting the undisturbed area between the existing dwelling and the proposed dwelling to the river. So I think what we would prefer to do would be to mitigate it for it the way that your regulations allow us to.
Well, I mean, if it were an addition, as we discussed in the last presentation we just had, that it was just right on the 50 and that sort of a thing, you know, I'd probably be less concerned, but the fact that you're tearing down the existing dwelling completely, and essentially removing all structures from the 50 with the exception of your wooden shed, to replicate that and put a new structure back into the 50, I just don't, I'm not in favor of that. Because you do have the room to put it elsewhere and get it outside of the 50. Views, you know, being what they may be, but I think that you could probably still maintain some of the view, depending on how you oriented the new structure. But that's just my concern, and probably my primary concern with this.
Thanks, Ernie. Mark, any comments?
Not at this time.
Thanks. Jim?
Yeah, I think the main thing is to, calculate the number, and then I would like to see all the mitigation be on areas that are degraded either as lawn, hardscape, where the shed was, driveway, something, but not natural area. Our regulations specifically say leaving an area to grow is not mitigation. Those are my two concerns.
If I may real quick, when you double the amount it's gonna be in the 50 to 100, but subtract the 58 from the 0 to 50, you get 1970 square feet.
Mitigation?
Mitigation, yeah, minimum
Required
mitigation
mitigation.
required.
Okay, that's good to know.
Thank you, sorry.
Stan, any thoughts?
I'm just gonna mention, I'm gonna be abstaining on this one.
Okay, all right, thank you. John?
I guess I'd just mention that I agree with the notion that letting bayberry grow doesn't cut it. And I also like to say I really, really, really like that umbrella tree. I'm really sorry you have to cut it.
That's so cool.
Can't you just make the place a shrine to that tree and forget about the house?
Right in the middle of the house, right.
All right, thank you. I have no new comments to offer. I agree with Ernie's comments and what Jim had to say, and I think, so you've got some options to consider. The shed is certainly one thing to consider as well. So, work with Amy, and we'll see at the next hearing, I guess, so.
Our next available, because we are supposed to meet the day before Thanksgiving, we're not. We're gonna meet Monday the 19th.
Is that too soon, or would you rather schedule for the one after?
No, I
Okay.
think Phil and I are prepared. When would you need the plans by, Amy?
If it's mainly gonna, well, I mean, certainly take into account other comments, but it seems like most of the comments were about plantings. I wanna give you enough time, so, I mean, I may not have my full review to you folks, but I could accept them as late as, like, noon the Thursday before.
And what day is that?
That'd be the 15th.
Oh, we can certainly do that.
Yep.
It's like a week from today, or a week from tomorrow.
Okay, yeah, we can.
Sooner the better, but that would be your deadline if I could have 12 by then. That way we can get them in the packet, so even if I don't have a chance to fully digest it, at least they'll be given, ready for you folks.
Yep.
Okay.
I didn't make the site visit today. Is it okay if I stop by in the next 2 weekends? Okay, thank you.
You want to see that tree now, don't you?
I do, yeah.
I took a picture of
It's
it.
a great part of the river, you know.
Look at
It's,
the pine cones up there too, on the top of it.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we actually do formal vote for
All right,
the
so-
And
19th.
and Monday, the normal time, or?
6:30
6:30?
in this
Yep.
room, the selectmen will be in the other room.
I move we continue this project until November 19th.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's a bunch of continuances. Yikes, it's a big meeting.
It's more impressive.
I found bigger ones that some oyster harbors that are
How big do they get?
I didn't recognize her at first, but I know Lori,
Okay.
so I didn't
And
want to.
wait, 'cause this is 30.
Are you friendly? I mean, it's,
She's a cat sitter and stuff.
Okay.
So I don't feel
I
it's
mean, it's
appropriate.
not often,
that's fine.
it's not often you see a 32-inch tree of any kind on your
Interesting
side.
comments from the abutter.
And they're incredibly slow growing.
Concerned about a lot of activity around that area.
Yeah, oh. Sorry.
We don't have full compliance in town. There's a lot going on.
Can you give a copy of this to the applicant? I should
I'm
have
gonna sneak to
mentioned,
the bathroom
we
quickly.
got a letter from an abutter, mostly just concerned with flooding in the area as a result of vegetation alteration, but I forgot to mention it. I am gonna, they all have copies of it. I'm
Alright.
happy to give you one.
Okay, thank you. Very good.
Yeah, if you could share that with them. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Take care.
All right, thanks.
I should ask, is that 32-inch pine, is it in the footprint of the new house? I mean, it's coming out?
I think it is.
Now,
Yes.
It's
You
right
know-
on the edge, the southeastern
it's
edge.
pretty much hitting the house right now.
Yeah,
So
it's
even
right
if
up
you
next
get
to
the
the
existing
foundation.
house down, you might.
That's that ornamental.
Oh, I don't know, you could probably be gentle
Just take the
It's a
house
nice
down and live the tree.
and build around them.
No, wow.
I would build around, no, I'm just kidding. It's impressive.
Something done before.
It would
Go see it, Ernie.
almost be worth relocating the tree.
Yeah.
Well, I don't,
Wow,
would
that,
it, would it
Can be done.
tolerate that?
do you have a spade like that?
No, no,
There's
I don't.
companies that specialize in
Yeah, I know a couple
relocating
people
Yeah.
who do.
huge trees.
Yeah, they might be able to pay for the house doing that.
Yeah.
Well, it would be an ordeal, but for the sake of what it is and the condition and the size.
I wonder how old that tree is.
Maybe they'll
It's
sell
old.
it to you.
It
You
is
know,
slow
you know what
growing.
I'd really rather have? I think the tree is great, but I'd love to take the trunk of the tree
Yeah,
and turn it into a tabletop.
beautiful.
If it's gonna come down, what a shame to waste it, because it's,
Yeah.
if you look at,
He can't do that.
no, I understand, but I mean, if you look at the way the trunk of that tree is shaped and just
It's really cool.
the configuration, it would be a pretty
Definitely have
remarkable
to go
piece of
see
wood.
that thing.
You know, all the
Yeah, it's
popular
nice.
Field trip,
stuff with furniture now, with having stuff that has live edges,
Yeah.
this is fabulous. Go see the tree. If you're,
To your point about the 32-inch tree,
yeah,
I bought a sawmill a number of years ago.
yeah,
It's a small one, and it'll take a 27-inch log.
huh?
And the next size up would take a 36-inch log. There was a considerable price difference.
Uh-huh.
If I had ever known there was as many 27-inch or 30-inch diameter trees
On Cape Cod?
on Cape Cod, I would have bought the bigger
Huh.
mill.
Yeah, they're-
Yep, I wouldn't have believed,
Right.
but it's amazing how many times,
People's yards a lot of the time too is where they are.
that's it, you know, they're
Not-
tucked away,
Not in forests.
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Okay. Ooh. Yep. All right, let me. Here, I should have got stuff ready to go next. Okay. We can do some orders and conditions?
Let's see.
Do 6 Saquatucket Point first.
Number 12, general conditions, you've got a date of November 7th, 2018. Should that be like 2021?
Yeah.
Yep. Same one for the next
Oh,
order,
wait a
too.
minute. So this is 6 Saquatucket?
Yep.
I have November 7th, 2021 on
Yeah,
mine.
I do too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, mine's 2021.
Maybe, you know what, I did these a long time ago, I may have caught it, and maybe you didn't get a copy of for some reason. But yeah, I have November 7th, 2021.
Oh, wow, yeah, mine's the set.
All right.
Okay, it's okay, no problem.
As long as we get it right and what goes out the door, right?
Yep. And, did we resolve whether that third pier was authorized?
No, I need to, I'm sorry.
Well, here's the question. I think we allow 200 square feet, right?
Yeah,
And so, you know, it's under that, because they're like 3 8-footers. But I know it was an issue at one hearing.
it was. Well, there was an issue because I remember one of them tipped the scale over.
Okay,
that it was bigger than the others.
right,
So I wanna say, and don't correct me, I wanted to say we conditioned that the number wasn't such a big deal as it was the total square footage.
okay.
I will go back and check it.
Just, yeah, I just wanna make sure the plan doesn't, if it is not in compliance, that the plan doesn't carry that over.
Yep, you definitely don't wanna do that, I'll check that in the morning. Sometimes after these late meetings, things get, as you know.
Yep. Incidentally, I came in the harbor on Sunday after sailing, and there was a guy digging clams right there, right on that edge. Yep, so,
There you go.
it was odd that he was there. It's just a weird place to be, you know? Not easy to get there.
Maybe as the owner, who knows?
Yeah, could be.
Still got your boat in the water.
That's the last sail, yeah. It's coming out soon. That's one boat of 3, though. One out, second one's coming out this weekend, there's a third, still in the water, so.
Hardcore.
Every once in a while, I mean, this morning was beautiful.
Yeah, right.
Morning's nice.
You never know.
Yeah, Monday was gorgeous too.
Huh?
Monday was gorgeous too.
Still the hope of getting a few codfish.
Any other changes, specials, anything like that?
No, it looked good to me. It's a site where I'd love to get a chance to go down there when it's happening to see what comes up. And I know they've got to notify you. Maybe you can.
I'll make a note, Commissioner.
Yeah, it might be a good site visit for everybody.
It'll be winter.
Yep.
Probably it won't, could be spring, but it's gonna be whenever the county dredge comes to help us anyways.
Right.
Okay?
All right. You want a motion individually or both at once?
Let's do an individual.
Okay. Anybody want to make a motion on this one?
I make a motion to approve the order of conditions for 6 Saquatucket Point dredging beach nourishment.
Second it.
Seconded by Stan. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Please
Motion
sign.
carries.
You were talking about 11 o'clock.
Well, that was before we had
I know.
a couple continuances.
It could have been terrible.
It always, we always get a couple things dropping off, like the day of.
We could have talked about the alum treatment for a while. So
Yeah.
that'll happen at
Well,
some
hopefully
point.
I can consolidate some things.
I might work on some graphics, a lot of quality, just to try to illustrate it,
That
work
would
with
be
Heinz.
helpful. And I'll talk to him about creating something,
Right,
making the
this is
data
the
a little
pond.
bit more user-friendly.
yep,
It
and
would be helpful too, we've got the list of ponds too, do they prioritize them as far as candidates for this sort of thing?
I don't wanna say, I don't know. I know in other towns, yes, have, but. Alright, so 8 Whipplewell for.
I have no
condition?
comments there.
Make a motion to approve the order of conditions for 8 Whipple Lane seasonal dock.
Seconded by John. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
And a couple certs, Nikki is continuing to send lovely letters to people to remind them to close their permits out. I think we're gonna have the highest number of cert of compliance requests we've ever had this year.
Yay, Nick.
It's good, I mean,
Yeah.
they really need to be.
There's no new revenue from that, though, is there? Because they've already paid, or?
There is.
Oh, they do? Oh, they pay for, okay, then they're good.
55 every time.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Because we have to go out and inspect it, so,
Yep.
I mean, granted, it doesn't go directly to us, but it's supposed to offset
All right.
somehow. And it goes into the general fund.
Done. Yeah.
Want me to go through them?
I'd say go through them and we can vote them all at once, unless there's an issue? Any
No, there's
issues?
a couple that are gonna get little side letters, but everything we are recommending for certs. So the first one, Daniel Pettingill, Qualified Personal Residence Trust, 49 Pawtucket Bluffs, proposed addition to beach stairs. So Nikki does these, the stairs are in compliance, and the area around the new section is well vegetated with beach grass. Further up from the new section, storage of kayaks is occurring. I will send a letter sent with the cert saying that they need to be moved upland. And just, if need be, we can send an enforcement. We can handle that separately if it continues. But we would recommend the certificate of compliance for that one. Vincent and Maureen Petroni, this is right near, that project, the mixed-use commercial residential that we saw on the corner of Gray Neck.
Neighbors?
Yes. Construct a garage. The work was done, so this is flood zone only. The work was done and mitigation plantings installed and thriving. Recommend a certificate of compliance. John Welch, 42 and 44 Snowman Road, demo of dwelling, grading, and landscaping. This is on the other side of the road from Winchmere Harbor on Snowman. So it's the very large house as you're getting closer towards the Winchmere. Mostly it was in our jurisdiction there was their large wall and plantings, and part of the driveway. I think the existing house previously had been within the buffer zone, but most of what's there now is not. The order required the first 100 feet of driveway to be pervious, and outside the buffer was allowed to be paved. The whole driveway is pervious. They don't have any drains, they don't need it, there's no erosion. One of the two sections of plantings is a little sparse, but not significant enough to hold up the certificate. We will send the letter saying that in the spring it needs to be planted, and I'll task Nikki to making sure that that happens. And then the Harwich Conservation Trust, this was actually, this never happened. It wasn't the trust proposing to build, it was a gentleman by the name of Paul Savory. And they were able to work out a conservation restriction, and the dwelling never got permitted, so it's a cert of compliance for work never done. With those conditions, I recommend certificates for all of them.
Who wants to take that one on?
I move to approve the certificates of compliance for the aforementioned properties.
Okay.
Second.
Second it? All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sending 4 around. 1.
I did review the minutes from
Yeah, let's do
June
the minutes
6th up
before the
front, so
discussion.
I just have a few comments I can pass to you or not.
You can, I have a copy of them, so we can make all of them in a minute.
Okay.
if you want. We'll do those before the chat about some encroachment issues.
Okay. One was a question on
but we'll
page,
get it out.
page
Oh,
3.
there's mine. Go ahead, Brad.
So on page 3,
Yep.
it's the Novak property. So in the boldface under the motion, I moved to deny it, and one of the reasons was changes to elevation. Is that actually, a performance standard, or is that, do we need more,
Hang on, I gotta
we need
find out
better
where they are.
language on that?
3rd page, Novak.
Yep, into the motion that I made to deny.
Judah, are we looking, sorry, June 20th?
No, I got June 6th.
Oh, sorry, wrong one. That one.
I don't think I have the 20th, or at least, it's in my packet.
Yeah, I only have the 20th.
I got the 6th by
Hold on.
email, and I guess I reviewed it.
Oh, I'm using Paula's packet right now.
I think the 6th, the 20th's in the packet, I guess. I have it.
I don't have a copy of this, so,
I don't have the 6th. Did we get it from
Yeah,
a
I should
previous?
have a paper copy.
And you only got it by email, Brad?
I think that's where I got the
Okay,
6th.
I apologize for that. If you want to send me any comments, just,
Well, we can hold off on the 6th if no one else has it. We
Yeah.
probably have to.
let's do that.
Yeah. I'll just hold it. Trying to see if I have.
Does anybody else have the 20th?
I got the 20th in
I
my
got
packet
the
today.
20th, and I wasn't here that day.
They're pretty short if you wanna, just so we can get them done.
Yeah, I'll fly
If you
through it.
wanna take the 6th.
Yeah.
We're not gonna do, we'll do the executive
Where was it?
session
Where was
whenever
that?
we have one.
I got the changes on the 20th, Amy. Did you get, did you go over that one?
We're doing it right
Okay.
Must have been in
now.
Boston.
What do you got for me?
Oh, on the first one, under Richard Bosky,
Yep,
like fourth line from the bottom, it starts off stated he has no issues with.
yep,
No, that one's fine. Go up 2 more lines.
Okay.
Yusowski stated that she recommends.
oh,
Yeah,
I'm at the,
yeah. And
it's
then
okay.
on the next page, at the end of the Steve Walsh,
At the end of-
last regular line,
Walsh,
Yusowski
yep.
is like the trellis moved.
Okay.
And on the back page, under the 6th line up from the bottom of the Heartland Wetland Protection Reservoir, shellfish mitigation will be mentioned in the tidal water section.
Yep.
Yeah. That's all I had on that one.
Cool, thank you.
I didn't get the other ones. They weren't in my package.
They may have just been emailed, we may have accidentally forgot to make paper copies.
This letter from the abutter on 20 Chase Street was critical of 24 Chase Street.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that was a very controversial project for us. Am I
No.
missing anything, or?
No, just so, I mean, you're aware, what we condition, she's concerned, generally, I mean, she's the one, she also sent the FEMA, the paper article, the article in
Oh.
the paper too.
Yeah.
She's concerned in general about flooding, and she's concerned about the impact that removal of trees
Mm-hmm.
can have on that, and whether or not the flood maps are accurate, and, but in particular about that other parcel, she was, concerned about the driveway being the driveway is impervious. We had said it should be pervious, but only a very couple square feet were actually in the 100-foot buffer zone to the wetland. And so when this came for assertive compliance, probably about a year ago now, a little over, we made that known to you, that it, you know, in the grant, it wasn't a big deal, that it was just a couple square feet
Right.
that were not, and we really didn't have the power to tell people outside the 100-foot buffer that it
Right.
had to be impervious. I explained that to her, so.
Yep.
But some of the things she mentions, like cutting of trees and that sort of thing, are those all outside of our jurisdiction?
I quickly went through, especially the ones where she said like all the trees were cut down, those are outside the flood zone.
Yeah.
Or outside the current mapped flood zone. I have to check, there's a couple other little ones, that I will check on, but.
I have no comments on the 20th minutes.
I have Ernie's corrections.
Okay. Anyone else?
No comments.
Okay. Do we need a motion, or do I just sign?
Motion,
I
please.
move we approve the minutes for June 20th, 2018.
Second.
Second that, all those in favor?
Aye. Can't sign it because I have a correction, but
Okay.
we actually technically don't need them to be signed, so I'll make, as long as you're comfortable, they're just grammatical spelling
Sure.
issues. If you're comfortable, I'll make those changes and post them.
Okay.
Okay, it's kind of an open discussion. Try to make it brief. It's 9:30, isn't so bad. So over the past weeks, couple months, we've had a lot of reports of encroachment onto our conservation lands, and in particular, I'll just mention our Texera conservation property off of Queen Anne Road. There's a trail system there. It appears that somebody, and we haven't verified it yet because we have to locate bounds, and I've been out there with the surveyor, but it appears that some trails have been almost decommissioned by people and other ones created. And it also may be that there's some stump dumping and general yard debris dumping happening on town land. So we're gonna, like I said, I went out with the town surveyor, we pulled old property plans, we're investigating it. That is something that, as long as you're okay with my handling it this way, if we find out that activity is happening on town land, we can do a couple things. We can have that person in here. If it's egregious, I'd like to have this person in here for, we haven't done this in a while because we haven't had a case, a show cause hearing. Have them explain what's going on, what they did, and we come up with a plan for putting things back. And in this case, it would be removal of dump debris, maybe some replanting, assisting with rerouting trails.
There's a large amount of knotweed in there now, right?
There is some knotweed. I think that is on that
there.
person's property.
Yeah, it's hard to tell where the lines are.
So-
Right, so, go ahead.
So you're thinking, your conclusion is that it's one person and it's in a butter? That's,
I think it's two people. But I'm not gonna throw names out, because we have to verify things. One of the properties is very deep as it is, so it could just be, this person is also using their property in such a manner, so it could just be a misunderstanding of the line. But it's gotten, before, a couple months ago, it was like very clear to me that it was probably on their property. Now there's a lot more activity going on, and I think it's encroached onto ours. So in the past couple months, it's been a lot worse. So we're in the process of figuring that out. Been made aware of some issues on other town conservation lands near Hawk's Nest. We've had a lot of claims, not just there, but on other places, of ATV use. Enlarging of trails, just, you're not supposed to use them anyways. But it's just causing some habitat fragmentation, specifically on a parcel near Hawk's Nest. We're not sure if a road, it's almost a road that's there, whether that should even be there. So, we're
that
go ahead.
one in Herring River where the people, they built a bridge over the river.
Right, so
With-
that's
with
someone I gotta
down
catch
and,
up with Jim
you know,
on.
Several tupelo trees and creating a pretty significant bridge.
Yep. Also went up to Robbins Pond, sorry, go ahead.
do you think that's part of ATV use?
Yeah, someone essentially created an ATV park in this area of town conservation land on Herring River, north of Route 6. It's not often visited,
It's off
but it
headwaters.
is town conservation area, and they cross the river multiple times. Sometimes
Alright.
they
I gotta
go
get on
across
that.
it, but sometimes they made a bridge in one area. I don't think many people go there. I just happened to.
It's gonna be hard to
be in
figure
there
out who was doing it
all the
because it's so
time.
many.
Yeah, no, there's. It's kind of.
But removing
it's
of
kind
the
of
bridges.
everywhere, I guess. The ATV thing.
Yeah.
Um,
These issues, the issues kind of change and go to different places and different issues depending on the year almost. But before we used to have crazy ATV use at Thompson's Field, and we don't anymore. But
And were there enforcement actions at the time? or-
well, partially that, and it's since become extremely much more popular for walking.
I see.
So it's almost, they almost got chased out because of that. But I also went to a very little-known property that we have, because it doesn't have a formalized trail system. It's in Northwest Harwich, Robbins Pond Conservation Area. It's kind of an extension of the Punkhorn from Brewster. And, the last time I went in there was probably a year ago. And there's just, extensive, you know,
Yeah,
trails.
last time I was there, I actively saw people pulling in big trucks with trailers and ATVs
Yeah.
right around the bog, just unloading them and having a major day of, you know,
Oh, really?
ATV
Yeah. I mean,
use.
There are,
So,
it's just
yeah.
it is causing some disturbance and habitat fragmentation. And before the issue there wasn't so much that, it was dumping. I mean, we would pull
Yeah.
refrigerators and stoves out of over there. That's by Leo Kukunis's place.
Yeah.
And he had a camera there for a while. They were tearing down his posts. It seems less of the vandalism right now and more of ATV use. Those things are going to be harder to. We've told the police about them, and we have and continued to request whenever they're out on patrol in areas to take swings by, because even maybe just enhanced you know, if they're seen being out there, maybe it'll dissuade some people from going. I don't know.
Can fines be issued by the police or
They can.
come through us both?
Nope, they can, trespass and, I mean,
Oh,
the
do
first one's gonna be through them, because it's gonna be them catching them, probably not us.
Do we prohibit entry, or is it we prohibit
We
entry
allow
with
passive,
vehicles? Yeah,
we allow passive recreation
yeah.
and ATV and bike use, off-road, you know, motorized, any motorized is prohibited,
It's restricted by state law.
Right.
Really?
Yeah.
so,
For an area that's, you know, it's considered conservation.
There's somewhere, I think it's right along Route 6 in Harwich, where there's a well-worn,
Yeah, they cross the highway all over the place. It's always been like that.
yeah, that's the headwaters area.
Yeah.
How do you know all this?
I did these around there.
He walks.
Yeah, I know about that.
I went in the woods with just cars, we just drove in there,
Yeah.
the dirt roads were
Well, we
everywhere.
were talking about that, though. Unless you have permission on private property, there are no legal trails for people in the state to use.
For ATVs.
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 On private property, they're.
No, on private property
Yeah.
with permission, otherwise they're trespassing, whether it be power lines or anything.
So we're gonna, Jim, I will get on that one with at headwaters, in the headwaters area, in the Herring River. We'll tackle the ones where we, like text error, where we think it's coming from one or two people. Try to nip those and then try to take some preventative measures in maybe other areas, so.
Okay, thank you, Amy. That's-
Yep, we've had some very productive trail days, Nikki and I, and some members of the informal trails group, as well as AmeriCorps. We're out at Thompson's Field. People will be happy. We're starting now that the stumps that were yay high on the 39 side have been dead for a few years. We're starting to go in and flush cut everything. People will be happy. It looks better.
Yeah, no, it's.
Yeah, it was a fun day. It was a beautiful day last week. We're gonna have another work day later in November. I'll let you guys know when it is. If you wanna stop by, you're welcome to stop by or help out.
Sure.
We have a new AmeriCorps member, Ben. He's from Pennsylvania, and you'll meet him, well, you've already met him, some of you. He's been helping out big time. We're
I
gonna,
met him, where did I meet him?
he came on site visits one day because
Oh,
he
that's
normally is with
right,
me
yeah.
on Thursdays, but we had to switch. So, that's what's going on here.
Sounds good.
Something briefly on this, this letter about
Oh, yeah,
the herbicide there.
we can have them in if you want.
That was, this paragraph here where they talk about, you know, municipal owned or controlled lands. Just kind of what I was getting at, talking with Heinz about, and just, that for a townwide policy for everybody,
Yeah.
for all property owners, but also for the town departments.
Mhm.
Yeah, because we're spending a lot of money on alum treatment, and, you know, it's a little spooky. We'll probably end up doing it, but like to see something happen. I know the wastewater is kind of the big thing, but it's gonna take a while to implement that.
Sure. And
Things
time to
are
see.
actually likely to get quite a bit worse wastewater-wise before they get
Before they
better.
get better. Mhm.
We're building houses like crazy right now, septic
Mhm.
systems are going in. So this is one way to mitigate that effect a little bit, even though fertilizers might only be 10% or whatever they are. If you reduce that 10% to virtually zero, it's a significant mitigation.
Absolutely.
You should have been on the golf course with me this morning. They were fertilizing with this big thing, and
exactly.
and you couldn't, and he didn't care.
Cranberry Valley has a creek running through it that
Yep.
feeds Herring River.
But this guy had this big trailer blowing, you know.
And there's
spreading
no consideration of that by the golf department, I don't believe. I mean, and there's
I have to-
issues with the cemetery department at Island Pond. But just the general, it all ends up in the water, the nitrogen and phosphorus. So.
The town of Barnstable has a fairly progressive, their parks department, which does cemeteries, ball fields, and golf courses. They've adopted much better practices than a lot of towns here, which I can look into when I have time a little bit more, because it's also more cost effective for towns as well.
Yeah,
and they have great reputations for having beautiful facilities at the same time.
It's
So
probably safer for the kids rolling
Yeah,
and playing in them. And the only difference is getting used to the fact that, you know, a
It's not
golf
perfect.
course might not be quite perfect, or you know, things might look a little bit different, or there's, you know,
So-
it's and that kind of goes for the. I think an argument can be made that, you know, fertilizing a lawn heavily is having a negative impact on
yeah.
the general public.
I think the town is, I mean, just looking for a committee to kind of champion the effort towards going that way for the town.
Well, I just
So-
thought this alum treatment thing is a possible way to jumpstart that. It's the, you know, they're asking
A lot of money.
to allow this, and we can't, as a conservation commission, we can't protect the bodies of water because the things are coming from outside the 100-foot
Right.
buffer zone.
Right.
That's one way to
Mhm.
maybe all work together and come up with a
Mhm.
town-wide.
The health
plan.
department would be a good place
Yeah.
to work with.
Yeah, when I read this note, I thought, my immediate reaction was there's something the health department would be championing. So is Megan doing something about this too?
I have to chat with her.
Because
I
it's
think
more,
she received it too.
it's more focused on human impact as opposed to the environmental impact.
John, you had something, I'm sorry.
Well, I just wanted to point out a factoid about nitrogen and phosphorus in particular, and I'm not advocating one point of view or another, but one of the things I gleaned out of some reading that I was doing about the phosphorus pollution problem is that, and it's probably in a Ken Wagner report, is that phosphorus doesn't actually move very far. Nitrogen will flow from wherever into our body, into our water, groundwater, and make it to Pleasant Bay or wherever else. That's not the case with phosphorus because it binds with the iron in the soil. So it's really just the sources of phosphorus that are within only a few hundred feet of bodies of water that create the problem.
But that ends up being a few hundred feet, and
Right.
if you're on a slope, it may be several hundred feet. It ends up being most of the town that
Yeah, I
is
can see,
within
looking
several
at a
hundred
map of the
feet.
town, I can
It's
see how that
virtually-
is.
It'd be rare to find a few spots that aren't really, you know.
Okay, folks, I gotta go, so I'm gonna motion to adjourn, but you guys can keep up the conversation.
I'm ready to go.
All right, seconded?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
No cranberries.
Maybe that we're done.
No, we were walking the fair.